Chapter 619. Wuxia shook his head and said with a cold grin, "That camp belongs to us, do you? What does it have to do with you, fellow Taoist Han?" Laughing wildly, Han Xian flashed his body and shot out dozens of extremely thin beams of cold light from both hands towards Wuqi's face. The beams of cold light were silent. Around Wuqi, dozens of Xianbing crystal walls kept rushing out, but they were all shattered by the beams of cold light. For a moment, it was as if a peerless zither player was plucking the strings of a pipa with his fingers. The air was filled with a clear and melodious tune. The crystal walls were shattered, and a large sheet of cold air spread out in all directions. Countless palm-sized hexagonal snowflakes, as thin as cicadas' wings, fell down from the sky at high speed, plunging towards Han Xian like a rain of blades and arrows. As the beams of cold light approached Wuqi at high speed, Han Xian cried out in a low voice, "This is the 7-killing stab, refined from the essence of the 7-killing star. Nothing in this world can stop it. Enjoy the wonderful feeling of having this killing power enter your body." The sky was filled with killing intent, and the morale was as strong as steel. The strong aura of an army made Wuqi's body feel very uncomfortable. Hurriedly, he exercised all kinds of soul-protecting mystic arts found in the Inferno Hellfiend scripture to stabilize his soul. Letting out a long breath, Wuqi nodded to Han Xian and said, "Oh fellow Taoist Han. Hee, it must have been hard for you to track me all the way from Huangsha province to here." Wuqi snorted coldly. The Xianbing rose into the sky and fiercely charged towards Han Xian. The aura of a battlefield emanating from Han Xian's eyes grew stronger and stronger. Vaguely, he could hear the battle cries of countless soldiers, the noises of blades, spears, swords, and halberds cutting flesh and bones, the rumbling of war drums, and the thunderous galloping of horses. An extremely fierce and brave aura rose from the ground. Vaguely, a mist of blood burst out from around Han Xian, and suddenly, a large crimson star emerged behind him. Han Xian slowly lowered his body, and specks of cold light gradually appeared in his palms. He sneered in a low voice and said, "Looks like you're not willing to tell me your purpose for coming here. Forget it, I'll chop off your limbs and collect your soul. I'll find the answer myself. Haha, you really shouldn't have gotten involved in this matter." The star shark refined by Wuqi could also gather starlight, and turn it into an indestructible star aurora that could shoot out and injure people. This kind of strange magical power that was tempered by starlight collided with the 7-killing stab, and they were a good pair of opponents. The specks of starlight shattered, and the 7-killing stinger, which was originally flying at an incredible speed, was also hit by the starlight, and its flying speed suddenly decreased by more than 100 times. Black shadow, it was indeed a black shadow. This shadow was like a person's shadow that suddenly stood upright under the sun. It was so dark that it seemed as if it had been smeared with countless black lacquers. There were no facial features to speak of at all. Even though Wuqi's chaos divine eyes were powerful, he couldn't see through this man's face. Obviously, this man had some kind of extremely strange magic, or had been shielding his body and sense of power with a secret treasure. A strange weapon made from the original starlight of the 7-killing star? Staring at the black shadow for quite a while, Wuqi abruptly laughed out and said, "Who do you think you are? You said that you can turn my body into meat paste, but can you really kill me? Why are you cowering? Are you too ashamed to see the others? Come on, let me see how powerful you are." Clang! The star shark quaked intensely, and Han Xian was forced back for a few steps. Han Xian looked at Wuqi and growled in a deep voice, "I am Han Xian, a soldier." Snorting coldly, Wuqi's body suddenly transformed into a puff of devil power and dissipated. The cold beam of light penetrated the devil power transformed from Wuqi and spun in the air for tens of circles, but failed to locate Wuqi's power. Helplessly, it could only transform into a beam of cold light and fly back, falling into the hand of the man who suddenly showed up in the air. Han Xian narrowed his eyes. The blood-red light in his eyes grew brighter and brighter. He said coldly, "Why do you pretend to be ignorant? Since you went to Huangsha province, don't you know that our emperor was attacked by an assassin in Huangsha province, and we don't know whether he's still alive or not? We all know what you're going to do there. Why do you need to hide it with lies?" Han Xian just kept moving quickly around Wuqi, his body flickering and flashing in the air like a ghost, appearing here and there from time to time. Dozens of cold beams of light kept piercing around Wuxia, shattering the Xianbing crystal wall, and shattering the snowflakes falling from the sky when Han Xian shook his body, shattering them into ice crystals and scattering in all directions. My fellow Taoist, why did you attack me for no reason? Staring at the dark figure, Wuxia let out an unpleasant laugh. A cold gleam flickered in the dark figure's palm as he pointed his finger at Wuxia and said, "It does have something to do with me. Is that man called Xiang Yu? I've been following him all the way here, and judging by his appearance, he looks like an old friend of mine. Is he Xiang Yu?" Wuxia pondered for a brief moment, then shook his head and said, "What does it have to do with you whether I know him or not?" The pitch-black fiend energy was gathering inwardly, and Wuxia had reappeared. When he was reforming his body, he had made some minor changes to his face, height, the thickness of his arms, the size of his waist, and many other details. But these minor changes had made him look like a completely different person, and had nothing to do with Wuxia at all. On top of that, Wuxia had purposely released a strange aura from his body, which was the prime energy essence of the ancient mystifying hag from the Pearl of the Shun, filled with a strange power that could confuse one's mind. Layers of ice walls, as thin as a cicada's wings and measuring a few miles in circumference, emerged before the cold gleam. It was the strongest defensive divine ability found in the Dark Een Water scripture, but they were shattered by the cold gleam one after another. Amidst a silvery cracking noise, the cold gleam shattered 33 layers of ice walls in a row, piercing straight into Wuqi's chest with a killing intent that nearly froze Wuqi's marrow. "This is the armor of Greedy Wolf, and this is the sword of Vanquisher, the weapons I forged by gathering the essence of Greedy Wolf and Vanquisher. Taoist, spare your life." Wuxia was talking nonsense with his eyes wide open. He stared blankly at the shadow and said with a frown, "Xiang Yu? What is that? Who are you?" Wuxia feigned ignorance and asked in a cold voice. The shadow paused, then slowly circled around Wuxia, shook his head and said, "It can't be Xiang Yu. Years ago, he committed suicide in River Wu, and his fleshly body and soul were refined by Zhang Zifang with the central extreme yellow devil suppressing heavenly thunder. His soul is gone, so how could he still be here? It seems that I have been too suspicious." Han Xian smiled faintly and said coolly, "I am very sensitive to the smell of blood. The man you saved had a strong blood aura emanating from his body, so I had no choice but to catch up with you. Tell me honestly, why did you intrude the army camp? I can let you die in one piece." Both men glanced at each other. While they were about to strike again, a strong stench of rotting corpses suddenly came from the surrounding air. Along with a few cracking noises, the cold gleam pierced through the 7 little fiends Wuxia had pointed out, then pierced straight into Wuqi's chest in an arc. Wuxia gave a slight cry of surprise. His body spun rapidly like a wild wind, and a hazy white mist sprayed out from his body. Within the white mist, one could vaguely see a boundless snowfield and an immeasurably large iceberg. A frigid gust of wind blew out from the mist, turning the area 100 miles in circumference around Wuxia into a world of ice and snow. The shadow gave a strange laugh, shook his head and said, "Although it is not Xiang Yu, why did he come to the army camp in the middle of the night? And why did you save him? Tell me the whole story now, or else, I'll definitely turn your flesh and bones into a puddle of mud, and scatter your soul into nothingness." The shadow looked at Wuxia from head to toe for a long while, then nodded slowly and said, "It might not be without a reason. You know that man just now?" The shadow paused for a brief moment, then he suddenly laughed coldly. The dark mist that enveloped his body slid down from his body like a stream of water, transforming into a faint shadow that merged with the shadow under his feet. Wuxia was taken aback. The man was clad in a tight black armor, tall and handsome. He was none other than the deputy of Liu Bang, Han Xian, whom Wuxia had met a few months ago. A wolf howl rose into the sky. The black armor on Han Xian's body shone with a dazzling, cold light. A silhouette of a wolf could be vaguely seen behind Han Xian's back. He rushed towards Wuxia at top speed, holding a strange-shaped longsword in each of his hands, and hacked towards Wuqi's head. Wuxia had only taken a glance at the large red star, which was full of sharp edges. When his divine soul felt as if it had been heavily cut by a knife, he gave a muffled snort. He felt a hot sensation in his nose, and a large amount of blood flowed down from his nostrils. The fierce killing intent that had just smashed into his body slowly flowed out of his body along with the blood. Wuqi stared at Han Xian in shock. He had only taken a glance at the large star that had emerged from the blood mist behind Han Xian. But his divine soul was already wounded. What exactly was the origin of this large star? Wuqi stared at the dark shadow. So this man had been following them all the way from the Yuya city's barracks? The Supreme Oracle in the Supreme Tower had all kinds of mystic techniques and divine abilities, and he was an almighty expert of the realm of primordial immortal. It was understandable that he could track them with his divine sense. Although Wuqi did not leave any trace of his aura, Xiangyu had left behind a trace of the smell of blood. It was his fate to be chased all the way here. But this dark shadow had been following them all the way here, and still managed to find them so accurately across 3 provinces. This was an incredible ability. 36 tall figures, each about 30 feet tall and wrapped in white bandages like mummies and emitting a strong stench of corpses, emerged out of thin air. Without uttering a single word, they leaped towards Wuqi and Han Xian. A cold light shot over and arrived behind Wuqi in a blink of an eye. After Wuqi began to practice the true body of heaven and earth scripture, his fleshly body had developed a very mysterious divine ability. Before his divine soul could react, his fleshly body had automatically shifted to the side and pointed out a finger backhandedly. As soon as the finger was pointed out, the void within about a foot in circumference in front of the fingertip suddenly cracked open, from which came shooting out an immense cold air. "Do you know the man who turned into a blood beam and fled just now?" asked the dark shadow in a deep voice. At this moment, Han Xian's eyes were bloodshot, emitting a 1-foot-long blood-red light. Vaguely, a boundless battlefield could be seen in the blood-red light screen, where countless soldiers were charging forward with all kinds of weapons in their hands. Standing in front of Han Xian, Wuqi felt an extremely fierce and murderous aura coming at him, as if hundreds of millions of mighty soldiers were charging at him. Even with his current cultivation base, Wuqi could not help but sway and almost stumble backward. After a moment of silence, Wuqi slowly took dozens of steps back. Wuqi gave a cold snort. Along with a long and shrill cry, the star shark darted out from between his brows, transforming into a huge green shark shadow that swished across the sky. Specks of starlight converged in the long rainbow brought up by the star shark, clashing with the 7 killing needles, and producing a deafening boom. The cold air condensed into 7 tiny ghost heads, clashing with the 7 killing needles and clashing with each other, producing a deafening roar. Chapter 620. A strange noise rang out as a huge palm slapped down towards the top of Wuqi's head. Wuqi gave a loud cry, and a 3-inch thick xianbing wall appeared above his head. When the palm slapped on the xianbing wall, a large sheet of dense, dark green smoke sprayed out from the palm, while the xianbing wall let out a shrill squeaking noise, as if ice water was poured on a red-hot iron block. The noise made Wuqi's ears ache and his heart itch. In just a fraction of a second, the smoke from the palm corroded the xianbing wall, and the huge palm continued slapping down towards Wuqi. Wuqi was shocked. Although he was only a peak-stage heaven immortal now, the xianbing wall in the Dark Yin Water scripture was a top-notch defensive divine ability, capable of freezing all kinds of poisonous gases and poison waters, and had a great restraining effect on all kinds of evil things. Yet, such a miraculous divine ability was actually restrained by the dark green smoke. What exactly were these 36 things that emitted the stench of rotting corpses? Not daring to take the palm strike head-on, Wuqi swayed his body and dodged the palm strike like a swimming fish. A loud boom rang out in the surroundings. 36 sturdy figures wrapped in white cloths waved their hands at the same time, and performed a strange incantation gesture. Then a shrill, unpleasant incantation rang out in the air, and in the next moment, countless 10 feet wide and long white cloths shot over from all directions, quickly intertwining into a spherical space with a diameter of several tens of miles, wrapping Wuqi, Han Xian, and the 36 monsters at the same time. Wuqi felt his vision turn dark, and then he found himself trapped in a strange space that was pitch black, with nothing but specks of phosphorescent ghost fire drifting across it. He opened his chaotic divine eyes, but he could only see about 100 miles ahead. Beyond that was a vast expanse of dark mist, and no matter how hard he tried, he could not see what was behind it. Next to him, Han Xian, clad in the armor of greed, was vigilantly releasing the 7-killing Stinger and Vanquisher to circle around him, illuminating an area hundreds of feet in circumference with a faint glow. Formation, Wuqi said to Han Xian in a deep voice. Han Xian took 2 steps closer to Wuqi, gritting his teeth and saying, "Your enemy?" Wuqi rolled his eyes and immediately put the blame on Han Xian. "Nonsense. I've been cultivating in seclusion in His Excellency's mansion for many years, and I've never had any dealings with those itinerant cultivators of Pangu continent. How could he be my enemy? But you, Han Xian, as the deputy of the celestial emissary, there must be countless people who want you dead, right?" Just now, when the Supreme Oracle in the Supreme Tower mistook Wuqi as a sinecure in some king's mansion, Wuqi immediately put the blame on himself. Then he quickly put the blame on Han Xian. "These people are here to cause you trouble. As the deputy of Liu Bang, how could there be no one who wants to cause you trouble when Liu Bang is assassinated?" Han Xian's face flickered. He gave Wuqi a look and said coldly, "You are trapped here as well." Wuqi pondered for a moment, then raised a finger and said, "Give me 1,000 upper-grade immortal stones, and some spirit pills or other natural treasures that I can use. I swear on my inner demons that I will do my best to help you break out of the formation." Han Xian was taken aback. He gave Wuqi a death stare and said through clenched teeth, "If you can get out of here, of course I'll give you something good." Wuqi said smoothly, "I won't release the eagle until I see the rabbit. If you don't give me anything good, you can stay here and deal with this formation." Han Xian had never seen someone like Wuqi who would take advantage of the situation. Gritting his teeth in anger, he pointed at his weapon and said in a ferocious voice, You. Fine, which king sent you here? Tell me the name of that man, and the rest can be discussed." Wuqi just smiled and said nothing. All of a sudden, a bone-chilling wind began to blow around them, rolling up dense black smoke that looked like a spider web and gradually approaching them. Figures could be seen amidst the black smoke, and vaguely, tall monsters could be seen approaching them step by step. Beside these monsters, there were some hazy and indistinct existences that constantly exuded a chilly and evil aura. These unknown existences constantly let out soft cries. When the cries entered one's ears, it was like the cries of a child's mother, causing one to have the urge to respond. Soul-snatching tune. Wuqi quickly performed a hand incantation gesture, and a primordial rune that twisted like a spirit snake took shape between his fingers, quickly entering his ears. Looking at Han Xian, Wuqi smiled and said, "Do not answer their cries, or your soul may be sucked away by some unknown existence at any time. I don't think I need to explain to you what kind of divine abilities these extraterrestrial fiends possess, do I?" Chuckling, Wuqi shook his head at Han Xian, sighed and said, "As for asking me to betray His Highness, that is absolutely impossible." After a brief moment of silence, Han Xian pointed at his own ears. Immediately, Wuqi performed another hand incantation gesture, and sent a soul-concentrating seal into Han Xian's ears. The soul-concentrating seal was one of the primordial runes, which could stabilize one's soul and condense one's divine sense, preventing one's divine sense from being shaken by external evils. The Tao of primordial runes was extremely mysterious, and with Wuqi's current magical power, even someone who was 100 times stronger than him would not be able to suck away his soul with an evil technique. Sensing that he was no longer attracted by the faintly discernible cries in the formation, Han Xian fixed his gaze at Wuqi, then fished out a palm-sized storage bag from under his sleeve, and threw it over to Wuqi. He cried out in a deep voice, "There are 3,000 upper-grade immortal stones, 100 bottles of spirit medicines produced by Tusita Palace in the Celestial Court, and several hundred spirit items of various kinds in there. Help me get out of this formation, and all these are yours." Gladly, Wuqi put the storage bag glinting with a 5-colored immortal glow into his sleeve. Then he raised his right hand and swore that he would do his best to protect Han Xian from the formation. After that, he spat out Star Shark and waved both palms, unleashing a large sheet of purple-green flame. Like a melted glass, the divine flame of order spread out in all directions. Wherever the purple and green-colored flame swept across, those vague and indistinct existences hiding in the darkness would let out shrill howls, as they were all turned into nothingness by the flame. An enormous amount of pure soul source energy kept rushing into his body, causing Wuqi's innate divine soul to grow rapidly once again. He took a long and comfortable breath. The chaotic energy kept transforming into the divine flame of order. In just the time of one breath, 30% of the chaotic energy in Wuqi's body had been transformed into the divine flame of order. Suddenly, Wuqi performed a lotus-shaped incantation gesture on his chest. On his fingertip, a ball of purple-green flame, about 10 feet in diameter, was burning fiercely, emanating a threatening heat that forced Han Xian to take a few steps back. Damn it! Purple and green. The divine flame of order that specializes in hurting fiends from the outer domains. Han Xian fixed his eyes on the ball of flame on Wuqi's fingertip and cried out in a low voice. Even those few great emperors could not control an innate divine flame of this level. Who is this guy? How could he have such an opportunity? After pondering for a brief moment, Han Xian suddenly grinned coldly and said, "He is indeed from the imperial clan of Dayu. He, apart from Pengu continent. Where else can I find an innate divine flame that can be easily absorbed?" The information provided by the few celestial lords is indeed accurate. Some of the princes from the imperial clan of Dayu are serving immortal cultivators, and some of their men have even sneaked into the celestial court. What they said is true. With a deep cry, Wuqi forced all the other flames out of his body, except for a tiny wisp of flame, and compressed them into a fireball, about the size of a human head, in front of his chest. It was purple-green in color, and no heat could be sensed from it. All its power was condensed into a fireball. The divine flame of order had been compressed to the limit that Wuqi could reach now. From the inside to the outside, it was clearly divided into 3 layers, and the core layer had been compressed into a liquid state. Die. Wuqi gave a deep cry and waved his right hand. The fireball shot out and smashed into the ground hundreds of feet away. A loud boom rang out, and a great sheet of purple-green flame sprayed violently in all directions. Pillars of flame, about 1,000 feet tall, rose from the ground and swept away the dark smoke and chilly wind in the surroundings. More unknown existences were burned into nothingness amidst the raging flame. An enormous soul force kept pouring into Wuqi's divine soul, causing him to gasp for breath. It took him a lot of effort to withstand the severe pain brought by the rapid growth of his divine soul. The flame swept across 1,000 miles in circumference, wiping out all the fiend gods who kept making faint cries. However, 36 tall figures were still approaching Wuqi and his companions, one step at a time. These eerie figures were shrouded in a layer of dense white light. The purple-green flame kept burning the white light, shattering it layer by layer, but new white light kept emerging. Many times, when the purple-green flame had approached their bodies, a large sheet of dark green mist would rush out and push the divine flame a few feet away. After that, new white light would burst out from their bodies. Han Xian gasped and said, "Mystic skeleton spirit gathering fiend armor talisman. At least 100 of them have been used. This is definitely the mystic skeleton spirit gathering fiend armor talisman, made by a sun oracle. Bastard. Who is spending so much money to kill me?" Han Xian was misled by Wuqi, thinking that these monsters were coming for him. Furthermore, when he saw the white light that kept bursting out from these monsters, Han Xian could no longer control the killing intent in his heart. He threw his head back and let out a sharp cry, then shot out the 7 killing needles with a cold gleam. Even Wuqi was shocked by what he saw. In the Directorate of Celestials, mystic skeleton spirit gathering fiend armor talisman could be made by star-grade junior oracles, sun-grade great oracles, and even supreme oracles. However, different people made different talismans, as the materials they needed and the power they could unleash were different. The mystic skeleton spirit gathering fiend armor talisman, made by a sun-grade great oracle, could withstand at least a few full-force attacks from a peak-level heaven immortal. And the materials used were even more expensive. On top of that, The Sun-grade Great Oracle had to spend a lot of effort and physical strength to make these talismans, and they might even lose a few days of their lifespan. Therefore, fiend armor talismans of this level were extremely rare. Even if they did exist, they were usually kept by the elders of those big clans as protective items. However, when these monsters were burned by the divine flame of order, dazzling white light kept bursting out from their bodies, and every time the white light shattered, a fiend armor talisman was destroyed. In just a few breaths of time, at least 100 fiend armor talismans made by Sun-grade Great Oracles had been destroyed. The cost was simply too high. Watching Han Xian rush out like a mad bull, Wuxia could not help but grin coldly. What is wrong with this Han Xian? Isn't he known as the General of Wisdom? Why is it so hard for him to control himself now? Hehe, it's not bad to have Han Xian as my fighter. You meow, is this your revenge? The strange thing is, how did you find my true form? Chapter 621. His killing intent towered into the sky. Right when Han Xian dashed out, 3 large stars soared up from behind his back, emitting a dazzling starlight that illuminated the surroundings. One of the large stars had countless edges and corners, which was the 7 killing star. One was pitch black like a black hole, which was the greedy wolf star. And the last one was crimson like blood, which contained countless wronged souls, which was the vanquisher star. With these 3 stars gathered, it was the matchless power of the vanquisher wolf star. The 7 killing needles shot through the air with a cold gleam that stretched over 1,000 feet in length, smashing onto the 36 gigantic figures like a thunderstorm. White beams kept bursting out and shattering, producing thunderous booms that shook Han Xian's body and made him tremble violently. The greedy wolf armor on his body emitted an eerie gleam, while the 2 vanquisher swords flew out and slashed, producing several thousand sword beams that swept across all directions. 36 monstrous figures surrounded Han Xian, slapping and smashing him with their huge palms. Each of their attacks could topple a great mountain and dry up an ocean. A dense dark green poisonous smoke spread in all directions as Han Xian fought fiercely with these monstrous figures. Wuxia pretentiously took out a few lower-grade immortal stones to replenish his energy, and in just the time of a few breaths, he had completely absorbed all the immortal energy contained in the immortal stones, transforming them into chaotic energies to replenish the energy he had consumed just now. He did not continue unleashing the divine flame of order. Instead, he waved both hands at Chi-Chi. His left hand was performing an incantation gesture and reciting an incantation. Numerous primordial runes that contain the power of earth, water, fire, wind, and many other elements of thunder roared out, transforming into a large energy storm that smashed and collided with the 36 monstrous figures. Meanwhile, large sheets of blue cold gleams kept shooting out from his right palm, as the soul-freezing immortal thunder, a mystic thunder technique found in the Dark Een Water scripture, was unleashed in quick succession, hitting the monstrous figures and causing their bodies to flicker violently with cold air. Han Xian was fighting desperately at the front, making him an excellent meat shield. The strength of his fleshly body was so strong that even Wuxia was struck speechless by it. He met the palms of the 36 strange shadows head-on with his fists, and each of his punches carried a force that could break the heavens, forcing the huge shadows back. The gust of wind from his fists contained an extremely brutal killing intent from the battlefield. When the murderous aura washed over the dark green poisonous smoke, it turned into green smoke and dissipated. With such a good meat shield in front of him, Wuxia, who was originally the main character, gained a huge advantage. He only cared about using all kinds of spells to easily attack these huge monstrous shadows. For the time being, he did not need to worry about his own defense. The star shark blade was hovering around him, transforming into a silver cyan spiritual light that was wandering around. Every now and then, it would let out a few high-pitched screeches and shoot out large amounts of starlight that looked like rubies and sapphires. After a full hour, one of the strange shadows was finally hit by Wuqi's several dozens of ice soul and soul-splitting immortal thunders in a row. The fiend armor talisman it carried was completely depleted, and 3 thunderbolts smashed onto its body at the same time. Along with a series of cracking noises, A cold power that was strong enough to freeze even diamonds into ice crystals struck into the monster's body along with the thunder power. The white cloth wrapped around the monster's body was torn apart one after another, exposing the gigantic body that was wrapped under the white cloth. Wuxia could not help but suck in a cold breath. These huge shadows looked extremely ferocious. Wuxia reckoned they were made from the corpses of longbow men, as the chest and abdomen of all these corpses were filled with some kind of unknown filler, which should be some kind of herbal paste. Amidst the sticky, green, translucent paste, a strange heart the size of a human head was beating violently. Hundreds of black and red veins were growing out of the heart, connected to the strange shadow's body, pumping ceaselessly, sending a strong force into the strange shadow's body at all times. Their huge bodies were shriveled and ugly, their muscles tightly bunched up, and their muscle fibers could be seen clearly. They looked like dried toads, emanating an indescribable cruelty and evilness. Their facial features were deformed. Their eye sockets were filled with red crystals, and their noses and lips were cut off. Their sharp teeth were a few inches long, as sharp as blades. They did not look like the teeth of a human, but the organs of some wild beasts. 3 ice soul and soul-splitting immortal thunders from Wuxia struck the hideous monster at the same time, immediately covering its body with a thick layer of xianbing. The monster's movement slowed down abruptly, allowing Han Xian to lunge forward like a mad tiger, swinging the pair of swords whistling through the air. Dozens of sword beams hacked on the monster's body, chopping off its limbs and head. Dark blood splashed and sprayed in all directions, twisting in the air like poisonous snakes. Together with the broken limbs, they danced in the air for a few moments. Suddenly, the blood shrank inwards, and the broken limbs and head flew back to their original positions at the same time, reattaching themselves to the monster's body. A blood-red light flashed, and the wounds were healed. Then, the monster casually slapped heavily on Han Xian's back. Han Xian, who thought he had killed the monster and exposed his back to the monster, gave a muffled snort and staggered a few steps forward. The power of this palm strike was at least 10 times stronger than the one Han Xian used to fight against them just now. Fortunately, Han Xian was wearing the greedy wolf armor, an immortal item defensive armor, which prevented the poisonous gas from penetrating into Han Xian's body. However, the tremendous force of the palm strike still made Han Xian see stars, and he felt a severe pain in his spine, as if it were about to break. Bastard! What is this thing? Han Xian cursed aloud, spraying countless water droplets towards Wuxia. My vanquisher carries the killing intent of the stars in the sky, and can kill all living beings in this world. But, why is this thing unharmed after being hit by my sword? Wuxia coughed and said coolly, if this thing doesn't have any life force, how could fellow Taoist Han kill it with your sword? Han Xian was taken aback, then he gave a furious roar. The 3-colored starlight shone brightly around him. He swung his sword quickly in the air, unleashing 36 dark runes that looked like wolf heads, shooting towards the 36 monsters in a row, bringing up a dazzling light that was over 1,000 feet long. He grinned hideously and said, who said I can't kill them if they don't have any life force? Even if they are ghosts, I want them to die again. Greedy wolf slaughtering the world? Ultimate curse. As Han Xian let out a loud shout, the white light on these monsters finally faded away. The wolf head-shaped runes smashed heavily onto their bodies and instantly sank into their bodies. Suddenly, a great amount of starlight sprinkled down from the dark sky. All kinds of starlight fell onto the bodies of these monsters, spinning quickly on their bodies like sharp blades. Pieces of broken flesh and bones kept falling from these monsters' bodies, but they were quickly sucked back into their bodies by streams of black blood. In just a moment, the killing and recovery had reached a magical balance. Seeing that Han Xian was using a mystic technique to deal with these monsters, the speed of the runes and thunderbolts in Wuqi's hands suddenly slowed down. Han Xian shouted angrily at Wuqi, "What are you still doing there? Why don't you cooperate with me and kill them now?" Wuxia smiled faintly. Casually, he pointed out several dozens of primordial runes, forming layers of earth, water, fire and wind restrictive spells around himself. After that, he continued to unleash more thunderbolts and fire, smashing the bodies of these monsters and covering their broken bodies with xianbing. The bone-piercing cold seemed to have a great effect on weakening the incredible recovery ability of these monsters. When Wuqi struck seriously, the broken bodies of these monsters could no longer fly back to their bodies, and many pieces of flesh and bones fell to the ground. Han Xian was wild with joy. Laughing out loud, he wielded the vanquisher, like an apprentice chopping dumplings in a restaurant. The two swords brought up tens of thousands of sword beams and fell onto the bodies of these monsters like raindrops, shredding their bodies into pieces. Bolts of icy soul and soul-splitting immortal thunderbolts kept rumbling out, freezing the broken bodies of these monsters, and their strange recovery ability completely. Working together, Wuqi and Han Xian finally managed to chop these monsters into pieces, turning them into a pile of broken flesh and blood. Right at this moment, a faintly discernible sneer suddenly rang out. Defective goods are just defective goods. Their lethality is not that great, and their recovery ability is restrained by the cold. Hee, next time if you don't give me the best, I won't even bother to help you old bastards. Han Xian suddenly snorted coldly and cried out. It's here. Found it. He dropped the vanquisher and abruptly produced a silver-white immortal talisman in his hand. He bit his tongue and sprayed a mouthful of blood onto the talisman. Immediately, a large sheet of immortal light that looked like melted glass sprayed out of the talisman. Within the light, a hazy figure emerged. The man slowly pulled his bow open, nocked an arrow, and released the arrow, aiming at the direction Han Xian was pointing at. 7 kills, vanquisher, greedy wolf, combine the 3 stars into one, and slay all immortals with an arrow. Han Xian snapped. Starlight of 3 colors shot out from the top of his head, and attached itself to the arrow, transforming into a beam of light that was about 10 feet thick as it shot toward a certain spot in the dark void. You sneaky bastard! Come out and die! Cried Han Xian. Hee, I have 360 tortures for you to enjoy. Let's see who dares to plot against me behind my back. The beam of light darted forward, piercing through countless layers of dark smoke. All of a sudden, a cloud of green smoke burst out of the void, and then a huge skull emerged. The skull sprayed out a large sheet of ghost fire, which collided with the tricolored beam of light. A loud boom rang out as the immortal talisman in Han Xian's hand suddenly burst into a silver flame, and turned into a wisp of smoke in a blink of an eye. The tricolored beam of light suddenly expanded by more than 1,000 times, surging forward like the tide of the Qiantang River. The huge skull let out a shrill howl, then abruptly shattered into countless broken pieces of bone that fell down from the sky along with dense black smoke. Amidst the sound of ripping cloth, countless pieces of white cloth fluttered down from the sky, and a sheet of sunlight sprinkled down. The formation that had trapped Wuqi and Han Xian a moment ago had been shattered by the mighty power unleashed by Han Xian's immortal talisman. Wuqi frowned and suddenly shrunk his body, transforming into a tiny speck of dust and burrowing into the dense underbrush under the ground. A creepy laughter came from the air. That voice said, "You received money from others, so you have to help others deal with disasters. Little kid, you are going to die today. TSK, your fleshly body is very strong as well. No wonder you've cultivated the true body of heaven and earth scripture to the 9 stars realm of the first Pangu heaven. It's a good material to refine a law corpse. TSK, where did you get these magical items that are filled with killing intent? You're really awesome." Wuqi, who had transformed into a speck of dust, was amused, while Han Xian suddenly leaped to his feet in a rage. What true body of heaven and earth scripture? I'm Han Xian, the deputy emissary under the command of Liu Bang, the king of Han, who is cultivating the true body of heaven and earth scripture. Han Xian hurriedly turned his head back in anger, but found that Wuqi had long disappeared into the underbrush. The innate escape art was marvelous, so how could Han Xian find Wuqi when he quickly scanned the area with his divine will? A furious shout came from the void, and a skinny, short old man suddenly appeared, accompanied by a pungent smell of a corpse. Chapter 622. Holding the sword with both hands, Han Xian's eyes shone with a blood-red gleam. He glanced around angrily, then roared at the old man. You want to kill a man who cultivates the true body of heaven and earth scripture? The old man paused for a while, looking at Han Xian from head to toe, then asked hesitantly, Are you really the deputy ambassador? A long roar that sounded like that of a wounded tiger echoed out. Han Xian swung the sword in his left hand fiercely, causing the surrounding air to vibrate. A blood-red beam of starlight shot down from the sky, transforming into 100 miles long, arc-shaped sword beam that darted across the sky. Along with countless ghostly wails and wolf howls, the sword beam reached tens of miles away and cut a 1,000-mile-wide mountain range in half. The earth trembled, and countless mountains crumbled. Heavy mountain ridges slammed into the ground, bringing a destructive blow to all the living beings in that area. Countless living beings were crushed by the collapsing mountains. Specks of soul light soared into the sky, all pouring into the sword held in Han Xian's left hand. Immediately, more ghostly wails came out from the sword, along with noises of chewing and swallowing. A blood-red light flashed across the surface of the sword, and its edge seemed to have become much brighter. Damn it! Han Xian stamped his feet, gnashed his teeth, and snapped. Old bastard! What is the name of the man you want to kill? Why do you want to kill him? Wuxia frowned. He couldn't let Han Xian keep asking these questions, or it would be bad if he exposed his secrets. Wuxia, who had transformed into a grain of sand, came next to the old man without making a sound. Then he slowly transformed into an ice dragon python, a silver dragon python among the dragon pythons of fire and ice. However, this ice dragon python that Wuxia had transformed into was too small, as thin as a strand of hair, and only an inch long. He took a deep breath and transformed all the chaotic energy in his body into the dark ice energy, which was the innate ability of ice dragon pythons. Then he opened his mouth and shot out a beam of white light that was as thin as a strand of hair, shooting straight toward the back of the old man's head. Wuxia was only several tens of feet away from the old man. The prime dark handle shot out from the dragon python's mouth was extremely fast and powerful. In just a blink of an eye, it had arrived behind the old man's back and pierced through his body. The old man's body stiffened, and a beam of white light darted out from his forehead, shooting straight towards Han Xian. Han Xian was shocked. He did not know what had ambushed the old man. He instinctively raised his hands and used the army destroyer to block the white light. A rumble rang out, and Han Xian let out an unpleasant groan. The white light abruptly expanded to hundreds of feet in diameter, wrapping Han Xian up with a terrible cold air. The powerful impact pushed him back for more than 1,000 miles, and he still did not stop. Along the way, Han Xian crashed into mountains and mountains, and everything along the way was smashed to pieces by Han Xian's body. Whether it was the mountains or the trees on Pangu continent, they were all hundreds of times harder than their counterparts in outer heavenly realms. Along the way, Han Xian felt a sharp pain in his back, stars swirling before his eyes, a stream of hot air rushing up to his mouth from his chest and abdomen, and a mouthful of blood had rushed up to his throat. But the terrible cold air contained in the white light had frozen the mouthful of blood into ice cubes, making him unable to spit it out even if he wanted to. Putting aside the fact that Han Xian was knocked flying away by his own attack, while Wuxia was marveling at the terrible power of dragon pythons of fire and ice, the old man's body suddenly turned into ice crystals and drifted away. But a wisp of black smoke flew out of the old man's corpse, transforming into a twisted figure that snapped in the air. What a shameless junior! How dare you attack me from the back? Before the voice could fade away, Wuxia, who had transformed into a dragon python of fire and ice, had dashed out, opened his mouth and swallowed the old man's soul. Stirred by the frigid profound handle, the old man's soul was digested into the tiniest soul particles, and all his memories were searched by Wuxia, including the details of how he tracked Wuxia to this place. Sure enough, it was Yumu who had paid a huge sum of money to buy Wuqi's head, and he had provided Wuxia with the exact location of Wuxia. The old man's cultivation base was about the same as Wuqi's, but he had kept a group of Dharma corpses, and was an expert in all kinds of mystifying formations. He thought that he could kill Wuxia with ease, so as soon as he found out Wuqi's exact location, he came to kill Wuxia with all his belongings. Unfortunately, Wuqi was in cahoots with Han Xian. Before the unlucky old man could figure out who his target was, his 36 Dharma corpses were killed by Wuqi and Han Xian. And Wuqi killed him with a despicable sneak attack from behind. How can Yumu pinpoint my exact location? Wuqi frowned. Impossible, absolutely impossible. After pondering for a brief moment, Wuqi suddenly sneered. He had cultivated the innate chaotic spirit body, which had concealed his aura from the great Tao of heaven and earth. So not to mention Yumu, even the stronger almighty experts could not accurately determine Wuqi's fate. But Yumu still had a way to find out where Wuqi was. Since he could not find Wuqi's location, he could find out the location of certain items on Wuqi's body. It was not difficult at all. Unless it was a natal magical artifact that Wuqi had refined, whose aura matched Wuqi's, Yumu could not find out their location. But as long as Yumu paid attention to the various miscellaneous items on Wuqi's body, such as his clothes, shoes, and even a piece of energy stone, a gold ingot, or a silver ingot he had received from someone, he would be able to determine Wuqi's location through them. As the military minister of High Province, it was impossible for Wuqi not to interact with others. Over the past year or so, he had received countless gifts from other military officers and officials from various provinces in Zhong Province, all of which he carried with him and hid in his storage ring. And these gifts could be used by Yumu to determine Wuqi's location through divination. Fortunately, I've also learned the art of divination, and I'm proficient in the Tao of ghosts and deities. Fortunately, I'm smart. Wuqi shook his head and said, Fortunately, the one who came to assassinate me this time is not very strong. If it were a gold immortal or someone stronger, hee. Laughing coldly, Wuqi quickly fled into the distance. Along the way, Wuqi injected a large amount of chaotic energy into his storage ring, using it to clean up all the items in it. As Wuqi expected, nearly 1,000 items in the ring gave him a strange feeling. But when the chaotic energy wrapped them up and cleaned them, the strange feeling disappeared. What a great Yumu! I can't believe he actually set up such a trap for me. You're really something. Hee, how did these items come to my hands? You're really not an ordinary person to be able to order so many people in Zhong Province to work for you. With a cold snort, Wuqi did not deal with the hundreds of items. Instead, he flew all the way to Yuya City in Huangsha Province, throwing them away casually. He deliberately threw these valuable gifts from the officials and generals of various provinces in Zhong Province on the side of the main road. They would soon be taken away by pedestrians and caravans. Since Yumu was willing to use them to determine Wuqi's location, he decided to let him waste his energy and blood essence. The divination technique consumed a lot of energy, and when he failed to determine Wuqi's location again and again, Wuqi wanted to see what other tricks he had up his sleeves. He could not believe that Yumu would use such a method to determine Wuqi's location, and then hire an assassin to assassinate Wuqi at a high price. He was really unscrupulous. Wuqi had only killed his son and disciple, and Wuqi was not the one who did it. Did they really have such a deep grudge against each other? Laughing aloud, Wuqi transformed into a gust of wind and flew toward Huangsha Province. Not long after he flew, a starlight flashed in the sky, and an astonishing killing intent shot past Wuqi's head. The speed was more than 100 times faster than Wuqi's innate escape art. In the blink of an eye, the figure had disappeared without a trace. Wuqi stopped in horror. That should be Han Xian, who was accidentally injured by his dragon python breath. What escape art did he use? How could he fly so fast? Wuqi stared blankly in the direction where Han Xian had disappeared, and he could not come to his senses for a long time. Ao Buzin darted out of Wuqi's hair. Looking at the faint wisp of starlight in the sky, he said lazily, "Don't you think he is very fast? Don't you think he is frighteningly fast? Don't you think your escape art is very slow?" Wuqi nodded repeatedly. Grabbing Ao Buzin, he asked, "What is that escape art? How could it be so fast?" Ao Buzin raised a claw and said slowly, "Any celestial lord who has received the title of celestial lord from the celestial court can fly with the power of the stars. This is the so-called flying star escape art, and it is at least 10,000 times faster than the escape art used by immortals of the same realm." Ao Buzan spat and cursed. If Lao Tzu had the title of Celestial Lord, Lao Tzu would definitely run faster than them. TSK, what's the big deal about using the power of the stars? When you reach the realm of Gold Immortal, you will be much faster than that boy just now. Wuqi was enlightened. This must be the special treatment given by the Celestial Court to those immortals who submitted to the Celestial Court, isn't it? The flying star escape art was indeed extraordinary. Reaching out his hand and grabbing at the air, he sniffed the air, which was filled with a strong killing aura and a faint smell of blood. No wonder he could catch up with me so easily. It seems he was injured just now. Wuqi nodded and said with a smile. Sneering, Wuqi transformed into a gust of wind and continued moving forward. Before long, he had sneaked out of the Crescent City in Huangsha Province. After gazing at the Supreme Tower hovering over the city for a while, he dared not to be careless. He retracted all his aura, even closed his eyes tightly, and shrunk his body to a size that was 1,000,000 times smaller than a mustard seed. Then, with an innate escape art, he carefully snuck into the camp outside the city and began to rummage through the tents. Ao Buzan shrank his body as well, hiding behind Wuqi, not daring to breathe too loudly. They all knew that there was a supreme oracle with a frightening cultivation base in the Supreme Tower, so they did not dare to be careless. Just now, the Supreme Oracle mistakenly thought that Wuqi was a subordinate of some prince, so he let Wuqi go. But this time he might not be in such a good mood. After searching through the tents one by one, Wuqi finally found Liu Bang and his company in a magnificent tent near the East City Gate. Han Xian was standing in the tent, cursing and complaining about what had happened to him just now. Chapter 623. The tent measured over 100 feet in both width and length, and was furnished luxuriously, which did not fit in with the tradition of Diyu. Putting aside the many rare and precious items, the most eye-catching item was a pill cauldron in the middle of the tent. It had a greenish-purple exterior, with ancient colors, and looked extremely extraordinary. On the surface of the 10-feet-tall pill cauldron, there were 8 fire nozzles arranged according to the position of the 8 trigrams, which were constantly inhaling and exhaling natural energies. The airflow was like dragons, shuttling back and forth between the 8 fire nozzles. Vaguely, there was a pale purple pill flame bursting out from the pill cauldron. However, it was restrained by the restrictive spell on the pill cauldron, and the temperature in the tent did not rise at all. Zhang Liang was sitting cross-legged on a hassock made of water and fire, performing an incantation gesture with both hands to control the pill flame. It was unknown what kind of pill he was concocting. The pill cauldron was sealed very well, and not even a single wisp of the pill aura could be sensed from it. Only the faint popping noises produced by the reaction of the medicinal liquid in the pill cauldron could be heard. Apart from Zhang Liang, who had his mind fully focused on concocting the pill, Xiao He, who had 3 pupils in his eyes, was sitting on a cloud bed, with a white python skin placed on his lap. He was carefully cutting the skin with a dagger, until it was as thin as a hair. It looked like he was going to weave it into a whip. The 3 pupils in his eyes were spinning slowly, and a strange force spread out from his body, enveloping the entire tent. A few mosquitoes flew into the tent from outside, but right after they entered the tent, they were suddenly set ablaze, turning into a wisp of green ash that drifted down from the sky. Wuqi retracted his aura, shrunk his body, and lightly squeezed into the tent. The strange force unleashed by Xiao He swept across Wuqi's body, but was dodged by Wuqi using a mystic technique from Scroll of Stealing. Like a slippery loach, he slipped into the tent and came under Han Xian's feet. He climbed up along the leg of Han Xian's pants, and hid under Han Xian's collar. Perhaps out of respect for Han Xian, the strange force released by Xiao He disappeared without a trace when it was 3 inches away from Han Xian. Therefore Wuqi didn't need to maintain that extremely exhausting breath-holding secret technique at all times. He crossed his legs comfortably on Han Xian's shoulder, and listened attentively to Han Xian's story. Han Xian happened to talk about the conversation between him and the shriveled old man that Wuqi killed. He said that the shriveled old man was killed by Wuqi's dragon python spray, and Han Xian was also sent flying 1,000 miles by the dragon python spray. Not only did his body suffer frostbite, His army destroyer sword also suffered great damage. The innate ability of the dragon pythons of fire and ice, jet spray, was the best at damaging all kinds of immortal items and magical treasures. It was even more lethal to the item spirits. As a result, Han Xian's prized weapon, the army destroyer, suffered a great loss of its spirit energy and nearly dropped its grade. No matter who that guy is, I won't let him go. Han Xian, who was pacing back and forth in the tent, ended his speech with a furious roar. Zhang Liang opened his eyes, which were faintly glowing with a golden and purple light. He glanced at Han Xian, then closed his eyes again. He locked his hands into an incantation gesture and casually pointed at the cauldron. A faint dragon roar rang out, and a few streams of purple pill energy sprayed out of the cauldron's mouth, forming into the shape of a flying dragon above it. Then a faint tiger roar rang out, and a few wisps of green pill energy sprayed out of the mouth, forming into a fierce tiger that ran wildly around the cauldron. The dragon and tiger energies attracted and colluded with each other, gradually forming a small whirlwind around the cauldron. Zhang Liang's expression was slightly nervous. His hands kept performing incantation gestures, and a purple immortal talisman shot out of his sleeve, releasing a clear light that enveloped the cauldron and slowed down the speed of the dragon and tiger energies. Cold sweat kept breaking out of his forehead, and his body was shivering slightly. Obviously, it was very strenuous for him. One of Xiaohe's legs was crossed on the bed, and the other was lazily placed on the armrest of the bed. While cutting the white python's skin, he chuckled and said, "You don't even know the name of that man, and you don't know why he is chasing after you. Pangu continent is so vast, how are you going to get revenge on him? Don't waste your breath. Have you figured out why they are spying on us?" Han Xian stamped his foot and sat down on the bed opposite Xiaohe. His eyes went wide as he snorted coldly and said, "I don't even know his name, so how could I know why he is spying on us?" Frowning, Han Xian looked at Zhang Liang and said with a smile, "I did see someone. When I caught up with them, I saw that man transform into a beam of bloodlight and fly up into the sky. Looking at his back, and the smell of madness coming from him, he looks like an old acquaintance of ours." Xiaohe laughed and said, "An old acquaintance? Who else could it be? Don't tell me it's the one who set up the feast at Hongmen?" The atmosphere in the tent suddenly became very strange. Han Xian was stunned for a long time, then pointed a trembling finger at Xiaohe and cried out, "How did you get that mouth? Look at his back. He does look like the man who committed suicide at the River Wu." A muffled boom rang out. The pill cauldron that Zhang Liang had been working hard to control suddenly shook, and the energy of dragon and tiger that had taken shape suddenly shattered. The purple immortal talisman swayed and flew back into his sleeve weakly. The lid of the pill cauldron was slowly lifted, and a pungent black smoke rushed out. With a gloomy face, Zhang Liang flicked his sleeve, and a large plume of black smoke flew out of the tent along with his sleeve. The 597th cauldron of Swan and ICC Pill of Good Fortune still failed. It was either a natural disaster or a man-made disaster. In short, the efforts of several years have been wasted. Zhang Liang sighed, stared at Han Xian, and said with a wry smile, "If you hadn't mentioned that man, perhaps this cauldron of pills would have succeeded, and we would all have the hope of becoming gold immortals, real gold immortals, instead of fake gold immortals whose magic power and cultivation base have been forcibly raised by someone." Han Xian spread his hands, and made an expression that he did not mean it. Next to him, Xiaohe sighed and said, "Forget it. The old immortal said that it would take 600 cauldrons of hard work to concoct this Swan and ICC Pill of Good Fortune, and 2 more cauldrons of pills would be enough. The old immortal has never missed a word. Just work harder." Zhang Liang nodded slowly with a gloomy face. He spread his sleeve, and a stream of yellow mist sprayed out of it, pulling the pill cauldron back into his sleeve. Then he walked slowly out of the tent and cried out, "This cauldron of spirit pills used to heal the celestial angels has failed. Make me 30 portions of them according to the prescription I gave you." Vaguely, they could hear some officials from Diyu whispering something to Zhang Liang. After that, Zhang Liang returned to the tent, put down the flap, and added a few powerful restrictive spells on it. The 3 pupils in Xiaohe's eyes shone with a bright light. In just a blink of an eye, The strange force unleashed from his body enveloped the entire tent, as well as dozens of tents nearby. On the large bed placed in the tent, Lu Bang, who was lying on the bed like a dead man, suddenly stood up straight. He spat out a mouthful of sticky, bloody saliva onto the snow-white carpet, then said through clenched teeth, "Xiang Yu? Hee, what a sensitive nose. I can't be wrong, that man must be Xiang Yu." Zhang Liang, Xiao He, and Han Xian turned to look at Lu Bang together. "Wine," said Lu Bang lazily as he stretched out his hand. A large golden peony flower flickered in the air. Then a long-haired lady, clad in a light veil and possessing an outstanding beauty, drifted out of it. She brought out a white jade wine cauldron that could hold about a bucket of wine, and placed it in Lu Bang's hand. Lu Bang took a sip of the wine and rinsed his mouth, then sprayed the wine mixed with blood onto the ground. He put one arm around the slender waist of the long-haired lady, pressed her down on the bed, and began fondling her. While drinking, Lu Bang said, "Have you forgotten what the old immortal said? He said that Xiang Yu might still be alive." Laughing coldly, Lu Bang patted the buttocks of the beautiful lady, whose face was already flushed and moaning. With that, a large sheet of golden light that looked like the petals of a peony burst out of the lady's body, then vanished without a trace. Lu Bang crossed his legs and held the white jade wine cauldron with both hands. Grinning coldly, he said, "If not, why would the old immortal leave behind the Green City clan and Great Han Dynasty? Am I right, Reverend Liang?" Suddenly, the curtain leading into the tent was lifted, and Reverend Liang walked out slowly. He cupped his fist and bowed to Lu Bang in a flattering manner, then said in a low voice, "Your Majesty is right. Didn't my ancestral master leave behind the Green City clan in that small kiliacosm to trace the whereabouts of those people? It's just that the disciples in the mortal world are too incompetent, as they haven't found their whereabouts after so many years." Reverend Liang chuckled, then shook his head and said, "But according to common sense, since those people have a backer behind them, it is possible that they have ascended from that small kiliacosm called Earth to an outer heavenly realm, and then come to Pangu continent to stir up trouble. If your Majesty says that person is Xiang Yu, then it must be him." After a brief moment of pondering, Lu Bang laughed coldly. He finished the wine in the cauldron, then said through clenched teeth, "Send Yulin to trace Xiang Yu's whereabouts. Once you find him, kill him on the spot. Capture Yuji alive." Xiao He and Han Xian exchanged a glance, then Han Xian nodded and said, "I'll be in charge of this." Lu Bang nodded slowly. Suddenly he drew a line in the air, ripping a large opening in the empty void. A burly man, whose body was covered with over 30 talismans and shackled, fell out of the opening and fell heavily in front of Lu Bang. Stepping on the man's face, Lu Bang grinned coldly and said, "Jing Mo, Lao Tzu knows you are Celestial Lord De Hua's loyal confidant, and we are on the same side. But that stab of yours has made Lao Tzu very unhappy. How much energy did Lao Tzu have to waste to pretend to be dead? So we have to raise the price. Tell your Celestial Lord that if you don't raise the price, Lao Tzu will tell everyone about your plan." Under the furious gaze of Jing Mo, who had fallen to the ground, Lu Bang shook his head complacently and said, "Your plan is too big. Lao Tzu can get too little benefit, but he has to bear such a great risk. If you don't give Lao Tzu more benefits, even if you have the backing of Buddhist League, Lao Tzu will still not buy it. Since Lao Tzu has become the Celestial Lord, do you think it's so easy for you to succeed without feeding Lao Tzu?" Zhang Liang, Xiao He, Han Xian, and Reverend Liang burst out laughing. Amidst the laughter, the former military minister of Huangsha province, Jing Mo's face turned extremely unsightly. He gritted his teeth and stared at Lu Bang for a long time, then asked word by word, "How much do you want?" Lu Bang narrowed his eyes and calculated for a moment. Suddenly he laughed and said, "With the help of the 8 treasures lotus throne, I can help Lao Tzu attain the body of the immortal dragon emperor, and help Lao Tzu's confidants attain the cultivation base of peak-level gold immortals. I don't think I can't do such a small thing, can I?" Before Lu Bang could finish his words, a strange force suddenly came crashing down, making Xiao He's body tremble. "Your Majesty, that old fogey wants to see you." Chapter 624. Before Xiao He could finish his words, the white jade wine cauldron in Lu Bang's hand had magically vanished. A trail of blood trickled down from the corner of his mouth, and a large amount of blood oozed out of his chest. Rolling his eyes, he fell back onto the bed. Reverend Li Yong leaped forward as if he had just lost his parents, grabbing Lu Bang's shoulders with both hands and crying out, "Your Majesty, you must hold on. I have top-notch elixirs here. Nothing will happen to you." He fished out a few pills made of unknown materials and shoved them into Lu Bang's mouth, then produced a jade bottle out of nowhere and poured a few mouthfuls of water into Lu Bang's mouth. As soon as the pills rolled into Lu Bang's stomach, a flush returned to Lu Bang's pale face, and his chest began to rise and fall slightly, as if he could breathe again. Xiao He and Han Xian flew to Lu Bang's bed as well, performing an incantation gesture and reciting a spell, sprinkling a large sheet of immortal light from their palms to envelop Lu Bang's body. It was a mystic technique, the incantation of soul recovery, which could stabilize the injury and keep the immortal soul and the immortal body from being separated, preventing the source of the immortal body from being damaged. Xiao He and Han Xian had exerted all their strength. Beads of sweat kept rolling down their foreheads, and their bodies trembled as they squeezed out the last bit of immortal energy in their bodies, trying to stabilize Lu Bang's divine soul and injury. Zhang Liang cried out helplessly, "Somebody bring me the herbs. Bring me the herbs. I'm going to concoct pills for His Majesty to save his life." Muffled footsteps rang out as Fan Kuai strode out of the tent like a steel wall, armed with a shield and a dagger, and clad in a heavy armor. His voice rang out like a thunderclap as he snapped, "Haven't you found the whereabouts of that damn Jing Mo and his family? I'm going to chop his entire family into minced meat and feed them to the wolves. I'm going to refine their souls with heavenly thunder and earthly fire, so that they can never be reincarnated." Hiding on Han Xian's shoulder, Wuxia watched the performance of Lu Bang and the others, and was really amazed. The strange force that Xiao He had released suddenly retracted, all of it shrinking back into his body. The flap of the tent moved, and two people slowly walked in. Wuxia withdrew all of his aura, and carefully turned his head to look at the two people walking in. The person in the lead was about 6 feet tall. He was neither tall nor short, not fat nor thin, not dark nor fair, not ugly nor handsome. His facial features and temperament were all ordinary, and even his hair was white like that of an ordinary old man. The ratio of white and black was almost 1-to-1. Everything about him gave people a sense of stability and harmony. The old man was clad in a grayish-white linen coat, with a hemp rope tied around his waist and a pair of straw sandals woven from hemp fiber. He walked in at a steady pace. No aura emanated from him, and he looked just like an ordinary old man. But as soon as he opened his eyes, what he saw gave Wuxia a great shock. There were no eyeballs or other organs in the old man's eye sockets, only 2 thumb-sized ghost flames rolling rapidly in them. In the deep, pitch-black eye sockets, 2 green ghostly fires were spinning rapidly. 2 extremely ferocious blood-red eyes could be vaguely seen in the ghostly fires, staring straight ahead. Vaguely, a ferocious and violent dragon roar could be heard coming from the 2 ghostly fires. Wuxia could not sense any life force from the old man either. He was an old man who had come to the end of his life, and was only relying on miraculous pills to keep him alive. His fleshly body gave Wuxia the feeling that he was only left with a layer of skin. It was highly possible that his internal organs had lost their normal functions a long, long time ago. It was only because he had been using spirit medicines to sustain his life, and had a powerful beast soul to nourish his soul, that he was still alive. An old oracle who had reached such a realm must be the master of the Supreme Tower, hovering over his head. The Supreme Oracle who presided over the Crescent City. He was also the Supreme Oracle who had caught up with Wuxia and Xiangyu with his divine will when Wuxia took Xiangyu away, and taught them a painful lesson. Star grade, moon grade, sun grade, and then the Supreme Oracle who had surpassed the sun grade. He was an expert whose overall strength could rival the primordial immortals of the Celestial Court, and the true pillar of the human race in Diyu. Wuxia glanced at him cautiously, and dared not to look at him any longer. Hastily, he shifted his eyes to the man behind him. For an old oracle like him, even though he had concealed all his aura and divine will, he had lived for countless years, and his spiritual sense was still very strong. Perhaps, if Wuqi looked at him for too long, he would have some kind of sudden impulse. Looking at him was stressful, and if Wuqi looked at him for too long, he might expose himself. Wuqi turned to look at the middle-aged man, who was clad in a black brocade robe and had a jade belt around his waist. His long hair hung loosely over his shoulders, and a headband was tied around his forehead, while a thumb-sized amethyst was inlaid between his eyebrows. He gave off the impression of old-fashioned, dull, numb, and stiff. When he walked, he looked like a wooden man, and even the length of each step was exactly the same. In addition to his bony, sluggish, numb, and stiff body, the man gave off a feeling of superiority. It was as if a wooden statue of a deity had suddenly appeared in front of everyone, giving off a great sense of oppression and pressure. Wuqi knew the background of such a man. He was from the most traditional and conservative clans in Diyu, and the children they raised were all like this. He had received the cruelest, hell-like training since he was a child, and had grasped an extremely powerful strength since he was a child. He had the power to decide the life and death of millions of people with just a word, and he could take whatever he wanted under the heavens, but he knew nothing about the ways of the world, and did not understand the ways of the world. Generally speaking, those sons of powerful clans in Great Yu were like this. But when Wuqi looked at the man's face, he found it very familiar. After rummaging through his memory for a while, Wuqi's body suddenly trembled, and his face turned pale. He stared fixedly at the man's face, clenching his fists tightly. Many years ago, when Yandan was telling Wuqi about their journey to Myriad Immortals' planet, he had drawn the face of the mysterious man in black into a portrait, and asked Wuqi to remember it. At that time, Yandan was just hoping that Wuqi could meet the mysterious and powerful man in black during his travels. But little did he expect that Wuqi would see the face again in this place. Perhaps they were not the same person, but they must be very close by blood. The face of this black-clothed man was more than 95% similar to the face in the portrait. The person in the portrait was slightly more mature, and seemed to be much older, while the black-clothed man in front of him was slightly more tender, and much younger than the person in the portrait. But Wuqi was sure that these two men were indeed directly related by blood. Even their expressions were exactly the same, stiff and rigid like a coffin. Wuqi recalled the main reason why he and Princess Zhongli left Myriad Immortals' planet: to find a way to break the restrictive spell cast on Great Yan's nascent divinity. He gave the middle-aged man a look. Perhaps he was the key to the solution. When Zhang Liang and the others, who were busy with their work, saw the two men, Zhang Liang immediately bowed and said, "Great Oracle Yu Gu, and who is this fellow Taoist?" Without saying a word, Yu Gu waved his hand and walked over to the bed where Lu Bang was lying, frowning as he looked at Lu Bang, who was lying on the bed and looked like he would die at any moment. He shook his head and sighed, then fished out a black wooden bottle from under his sleeve and placed it on the table next to the bed. "This is the black blood powder. I concocted in secret," he said in a hoarse voice. "It can remove toxins, stop bleeding, and nourish the soul. If you are not afraid, take it. If not, you can do whatever you want with it." With a cold snort, Yu Gu walked slowly to the side of the bed and sat down, then closed his eyes without saying a word. The man in black who followed Yu Gu and said dryly, "I'm Diyu King Yangqiu, and the Eastern General of Liangzhu. I heard that the Celestial Ambassador was seriously injured by an assassin. I'm leading an army to wipe out the rebels of Myriad Immortal Alliance, so I've come to visit." Before Zhang Liang could respond, King Yangqiu grabbed him by the shoulder and flipped him to the side. Zhang Liang staggered back a dozen steps, nearly knocking down a large number of furnishings in the room. With a gloomy face, King Yangqiu walked slowly to the side of the bed where Lu Bang was lying, looking down at Lu Bang, who looked like he might die at any moment. Instinctively, Han Xian and Fan Kuai took a step sideways and stood in front of King Yangqiu. King Yangqiu looked up at Han Xian and Fan Kuai, then said coolly, "I just want to see the Celestial Ambassador's injury." "His Majesty is seriously injured," Han Xian said coolly. "Please don't come any closer, lest your blood offend the Celestial Ambassador." King Yangqiu pursed his lips, and the corners of his mouth twitched slightly. This was his smile. "Don't worry," he said in a deep voice. "I love the blood of immortals the most. I've led an army to wipe out the rebels, fought in 175 gathering places of itinerant cultivators in 36 provinces, and personally killed more than 4,500 immortals of Myriad Immortal Alliance. Fan Kuai took a deep breath, then shoved his shoulder at King Yongqiu and bellowed, "Get out of my way!" King Yongqiu snorted coldly, and shoved his shoulder at Fan Kuai as well. A muffled boom rang out as a shower of light burst out of Fan Kuai's heavy armor. The immortal armor was shattered by the tremendous force. Fan Kuai gave a muffled snort as his body spun and staggered back dozens of steps, smashing two shelves displaying countless treasures. Roaring furiously, he smashed the tent and threw himself out of the tent, lying flat on the ground. Anyone who dares to offend this king has only one path, death. King Yongqiu stared coldly at Han Xian, who was standing in front of him, and said in a deep voice, "I just want to see the celestial ambassador's injury. By the way, I want to know where Jing Mo, the left military minister of Huangsha province, who assassinated the celestial ambassador, is? Did you really kill him on the spot? If he is not dead, hand him over to me. I want to put him in an important position." Han Xian's face turned pale with anger. Gritting his teeth, he cried out, "Are you here to provoke us, Your Excellency?" After pondering for a moment, King Yongqiu nodded and said, "I don't like the immortals of your celestial court, and I'm indeed here to provoke you." King Yongqiu twitched the corner of his mouth again, pretending to be a smile. "The best immortal is a dead one. What do you think?" he said with a cold grin. Han Xian was furious. He clenched his fists tightly, looking like he wanted to kill King Yongqiu with a single punch. King Yongqiu sneered and suddenly threw a punch at Han Xian's face. Chapter 625. King Yongqiu's sudden punch took Han Xian by surprise. As his cultivation base was far weaker than King Yongqiu's, Han Xian could not even see where the punch was coming from before it pierced through a helmet shaped like a wolf's head that suddenly appeared over Han Xian's face, and smashed heavily into Han Xian's face. A pained groan rang out as Han Xian was sent flying, crashing headfirst into the inner part of the tent. A series of feminine cries rang out as the curtain between the inner and outer parts of the tent was knocked open, revealing dozens of gorgeously dressed female immortals. When they saw Han Xian fly in with a swollen face, they could not help but shout and yell at him, unleashing all kinds of flying swords and magical treasures to rain down on King Yongqiu. King Yongqiu gave a cold snort. Two balls of black flame spun rapidly in his eyes, and countless black threads shot out of them, hitting the vital acupoints of the female immortals. All the flying swords and magical treasures froze in midair at the same time, and the female immortals snapped, "How dare you bitches? Kneel down before me." Like puppets controlled by strings, the female immortals dropped to their knees and threw themselves on the ground with lifeless eyes, putting on a posture that showed they were at King Yongqiu's mercy. Hiding on Han Xian's shoulder, Wuqi's eyes lit up. "This is the restrictive technique. This is it." The black threads shooting out of King Yongqiu's eyes were exactly the same as the ones that Yin Dan had shown to Wuqi. Clearly, King Yongqiu had an inseparable relationship with the person who imprisoned Yin Dan and the others. This kind of secret restrictive technique was passed down from generation to generation in Dayu's clans, so it was impossible for too many people to know about it. Wuqi began to think about how he could subdue King Yongqiu and learn this restrictive technique. But when Wuqi looked at Yu Gu, who was sitting silently on the bed, and then at King Yongqiu, who was shrouded in a dark mist and emanating a towering murderous aura, he wisely dismissed the idea of robbing them. Both of their cultivations were too strong, and Wuqi was far from being a match for them. After knocking down Han Xian with one punch and subduing dozens of female immortals around Lu Bang, King Yongqiu grinned hideously and reached out to grab Lu Bang's neck. Standing off to the side, Xiaohe sighed and cried out in a deep voice, "Why is King Yongqiu so aggressive? King Yongqiu, do you dare to look at me?" The tricolored pupils in Xiaohe's eyes began to spin rapidly, and in the blink of an eye, they turned into a splendid screen of light. An eerie, evil power came out of Xiaohe's eyes, and the surrounding space suddenly shook. It seemed that something wonderful was happening. King Yongqiu snorted coldly and turned to look at Xiaohe. "Why not?" he cried out in a low voice. As soon as their eyes met, King Yangqiu's body trembled, and his movements became extremely slow and stiff. It was as if both his soul and fleshly body were frozen in ice, and he had lost the menacing vitality he had a moment ago. The two black fireballs in King Yangqiu's eyes gradually dimmed, and his aura gradually dissipated. It was as if his soul had been sucked into some unknown space, and he could no longer control his body and power. Suddenly, Xiaohe let out a muffled groan. A hair-thin wound, no more than an inch long, had opened up on his forehead. A trickle of blood flowed out of the wound and gradually slid down his cheek. But on the other hand, a huge gash about half a foot long, about the size of a thumb, through which the white bone could be seen. Blood kept gushing out of it, and in the blink of an eye, the upper body of King Yangqiu was stained bright red. King Yangqiu let out a low cry of pain. He slowly raised his hands, trying to strangle Xiaohe. But the tricolored pupils in Xiaohe's eyes were spinning faster and faster, and King Yangqiu had only raised his hands half a foot before he slowly put them down again. Suddenly, Xiaohe's body trembled, and an arrow of blood as thick as a finger spurted out of his chest, piercing through his clothes. But a fist-sized hole opened up in his chest, and blood gushed out from both the front and back of the hole. King Yangqiu staggered and suddenly collapsed to the ground. Xiaohe's face grew paler and paler, and gradually, his skin turned transparent like crystal. Through his transparent skin and muscles, one could see that his skull was a magnificent black and gold color, with countless runes swirling around it. His skull no longer looked like a normal skull, but a powerful immortal artifact. It was a terrible divine ability that used one's own body as the material and heaven and earth as the furnace to refine oneself into an immortal artifact. Even the three pupils in his eyes were something that he had refined after birth. Amidst a cracking sound, the bones in both of Xiaohe's legs were broken at the same time. King Yangqiu cried out in pain as all the bones in his legs were shattered at the same time, from the base of his thighs to the space between his toes. King Yangqiu's legs were twisted into bizarre shapes. His face turned blue with pain, and cold sweat kept breaking out all over his body. But he still could not get rid of the control of Xiaohe's three pupils. The weakness of the human warrior's soul force being far too weak was exposed at this moment. Before he could protect his soul, or even wake up the beast soul sleeping in the depths of his soul, King Yangqiu was controlled by Xiaohe's bizarre eyes and instantly suffered a severe injury. Off to the side, Yugu slowly rose to his feet and opened his eyes, in which a ghostly flame was burning fiercely. Two blood-red pupils almost occupied his entire eye sockets, and a wild dragon roar could be heard coming from the two balls of ghostly flame. Grinning coldly, Yugu said, "How audacious! How dare you injure my royal family in front of me? Haha, do you really think that I won't dare to touch you just because you're angels?" Grinning coldly, Yugu slowly reached out a finger and pointed at Xiaohe. At that moment, Zhang Liang, who had been standing off to the side, suddenly let out a long cry. With his right hand, he produced a large white brush, measuring 4 feet and 9 inches long and glinting with bright light, and swung it in the air. A clear and melodious voice of a man rang out from the brush. "The ocean rages, the ancient mountains crumble, the river of stars scatter, the vast sun vanishes." Amidst a bright flash of light, Zhang Liang held the brush in his hand and smashed it heavily on Yugu's back like a blacksmith hammering at iron. "How dare you attack an angel, Yugu? Are you trying to provoke a war between you and the celestial court?" Zhang Liang snapped. No one knew where the brush came from, but it contained a terrible power. Even Wuxia, who was hiding on Han Xian's shoulder, could sense the fluctuation of immortal energy contained in it, which was comparable to the aura emanated by Patriarch Miaoing. A deep, muffled rumble of thunder echoed out. Caught unprepared, Yugu howled miserably as large sheets of ghost flame burst out of his 7 apertures at the same time. There was not much blood left in Yugu's body. Instead, it was filled with the fire energy condensed from the ghostly green ghost flame, which was closely related to his life. The blow was equivalent to an ordinary man bleeding from his 7 apertures, and Yugu was instantly severely injured. Roaring furiously, he turned around and snapped. "A primordial immortal artifact. Which almighty expert lent you this? How dare you attack me from behind with a primordial immortal artifact? Don't you have any shame, celestial court? Are you out of your mind? How dare you hurt me and King Yangqiu? Is Celestial Court really going to war with me, do you? Zhang Liang stood next to Xiao He with his hand clenched tightly on the writing brush. Staring at Yu Gu with his starry eyes, Zhang Liang smiled faintly and said, If King Yangqiu hadn't forced us, how could we have done such a thing? King of Han is seriously injured, and yet, King Yangqiu still treated him so rudely. If word of this gets out, I'm afraid the Celestial Court is in the right, while Du Yu is in the wrong, isn't it? With a proud smile on his face, Zhang Liang held his head high and said, Even if we bring this matter to those almighty experts, the one who will be scolded will not be the Celestial Court, will it? Those almighty experts? Wu Qi's eyes darted from side to side. Who were those almighty experts Zhang Liang mentioned? Was it a group of people, or some other existences? Zhang Liang's words had obviously frightened Yu Gu. Yu Gu, who was about to fly into a rage out of humiliation and kill Zhang Liang and the others on the spot, hesitated for a moment, then suddenly dispersed the energy he had been accumulating in his body and said in a deep voice, No matter what, you have to stop first. If you do seriously injure King Yangqiu, even if you have the backing of a primordial immortal, you will not be able to get away with it. Zhang Liang smiled. Just as he was about to ask Xiao He to release King Yangqiu, a dragon roar suddenly rang out of King Yangqiu's body. At first, the dragon roar was faint and faint, like the chirping of a bug in the grass at night. But in the blink of an eye, it became loud and vigorous, like the first thunderclap that rang out when the world was created. Accompanied by countless deafening rumbles, the roar spread out in all directions. With just one roar, the tents they were in were blown into pieces. Countless tents and camps in the surroundings were shaken away by the roar. Tens of thousands of soldiers were blown away by the tremendous sound wave, wailing and wailing as they were sent flying far away. Even the four walls of Yuya City, which had just been rebuilt, were blown to pieces. All the buildings in the city, big and small, collapsed at the same time, and countless boulders were thrown into the air by the sound wave. The mountain behind them was shaken by the thunderous roar, and collapsed by hundreds of miles. On the other side, a 10-mile-high wave rose from the crescent lake, and countless fishes, shrimps, crabs, and other creatures in the lake all exploded and died. Inside the tent, Zhang Liang, Han Xian, Fan Kuai, and the others were bleeding from their 7 orifices at the same time, while Lu Bang, lying on the bed, let out a miserable howl and jumped up and down. Hiding on Han Xian's shoulder, Wu Qi felt as if 10,000 thunderbolts had exploded in his ears at the same time. His eardrums were torn, and stars were flashing before his eyes. For a long time he did not know where he was. Ao Buzan poked his head out of Wu Qi's hair, and looked thoughtfully at King Yangqiu. His beast soul is Pu Lao. No wonder the roar was so loud. The one who was the most seriously injured in the tent was Xiao He, who had controlled King Yangqiu with his 3 pupils. An arrow of blood sprayed out from his mouth, flying over 100 feet away. A large amount of blood sprayed out like a fountain, as if all the blood in his body had been squeezed out by this roar. 2 of the 3 pupils in Xiao He's eyes had cracked and were no longer in shape. Clearly, his divine abilities and mystic arts had been severely damaged. Accompanied by a cruel laugh, King Yangqiu's body slowly floated up into the air. Looking coldly at Lu Bang, who was standing on the bed and picking his ears, King Yangqiu sneered and said, So, this is the seriously injured angel. With a wild laugh, a jade knife suddenly appeared in King Yangqiu's hand, and he brought it down heavily toward Lu Bang's neck. Chapter 626. It was made of supreme-grade black jade, about 6 feet long, crescent-shaped, and as thin as a cicada's wing. It was engraved with the true forms of countless ghosts and deities, and was shrouded in a faint black smoke. The ghosts and deities were looming in the smoke like living creatures, and from time to time, deep howls could be heard coming out of it. The handle of the jade knife was carved with a Pu Lao, who was lying prostrate on the ground with his mouth wide open, as if he was roaring loudly. Pu Lao's eyes were inlaid with blood-colored gems, and they gave off a faint chill that made one's hair stand on end. King Yangqiu brandished the knife at Lu Bang. Accompanied by the roars of millions of celestial fiends, an immense knife energy swept out, and a chilly wind rose from the ground within 1,000 feet around him. The chilly wind rushed straight into everyone's bodies, making them shudder. Even a general as brave as Fan Kuai felt his body go limp, and for a moment, he did not have the strength to rescue Liu Bang. Covered in blood, Liu Bang looked at King Yongqiu, who was also covered in blood, and asked word by word, "King Yongqiu, do you really dare to kill me?" The bones in King Yongqiu's legs were creaking, and his bones were healing rapidly. Without saying a word, he stared fixedly at Liu Bang, clenched his teeth, and swung the knife down. He had used all his strength in this attack. Even a gold immortal would be cut in half by him. Not to mention Liu Bang, a mere 32nd tier heaven immortal. The whistling sound of the knife had rendered Fan Kuai powerless to move, let alone Zhang Liang, Xiao He and Han Xian, whose will to fight was far weaker than Fan Kuai's. They cried out almost at the same time as they watched King Yongqiu swing the knife down. This was especially true for Xiao He, whose eyes had been severely injured by Pu Lao's howl. Blood gushed out of his eyes like arrows, as if he was going to spew out all the blood that had yet to flow out of his body. Yu Mu, who had just been severely wounded by a full-force blow from a primordial immortal artifact, grinned hideously as he watched King Yongqiu hack at Liu Bang. Yu Gu snapped in a low voice, do it now? After putting up with the Celestial Court for so many years, it's time to settle the score with them. Just chop him down, he's just an angel." Seeing that the jade knife was about to cut his body, Liu Bang suddenly laughed. Amidst the laughter, the flamboyant Liu Bang, who was no different from a local ruffian, disappeared without a trace. A strong pale golden light poured out of Liu Bang's body as he stuck out his chest, and his body seemed to have grown much taller than before as he clenched his fist and punched at King Yongqiu's blade. Other than Wuxia, who opened his primal chaos divine eyes to look at the source of the light, everyone else was forced to close their eyes. But the light pierced through everyone's eyelids, causing them a sharp pain in their eyeballs and causing tears to flow down their cheeks. Only Wuqi's eyes flickered with a bright gleam as he saw everything that happened in that instant. A tall, burly figure appeared behind Liu Bang. Liu Bang, who had become dignified, solemn, and domineering, clenched his right fist, and a vague dragon claw could be seen on it. Clutching a crimson pearl in the middle of the claw, he thrust it toward King Yongqiu's jade knife. A strong light surged as Liu Bang's fist collided with the jade knife and shattered it. Liu Bang, who had always been so lazy and looked like a bandit who was even worse than a ruffian, suddenly moved like a tyrannosaurus who had been curled up for a long time, and was awakened by a thunderbolt. As soon as he moved, it was as if the sky was falling and the earth was cracking, as if heavenly thunders and earthly fires were sweeping out. Around him, 9 golden dragons of light wheeled and danced in the air, as they swooped toward King Yongqiu with a sonorous dragon roar. A set of strangely shaped golden armor covered Liu Bang's body. The armor was shaped like a golden dragon, and Liu Bang looked like a standing golden dragon. He held a crimson pearl in his right hand, and a dazzling golden longsword in his left. With the sword in his left hand and the fist in his right hand, he punched out like a storm. Every part of his body, whether it was his head, his shoulders, his hands, his elbows, his knees, or his feet, had turned into a lethal weapon powerful enough to shatter the stars. Accompanied by a sonorous dragon roar, they pounced forward. King Yongqiu had never dreamed that Liu Bang, a mere 32nd tier heaven immortal, could possess such an overall strength that he could launch such a brutal counterattack. How could the cultivation-based Liu Bang displayed at the moment be that of a heaven immortal? Even an ordinary high-tier gold immortal might not have such a strength. Every punch could shatter the stars, every kick could shatter the earth, and every attack had the power to tear the void apart. Caught off guard, King Yongqiu was swept into Liu Bang's storm-like attacks, and suffered tens of thousands of heavy blows in just a split second. Trapped by Xiao He's 3 pupils, King Yongqiu's severely wounded body had lost more than half of his overall strength. How could he be a match for Liu Bang at this moment? No one knew the origin of the pearl and the sword in Liu Bang's hand, but wherever the pearl passed, everything was shattered, and wherever the sword passed, everything was cut in half. Strong lights of various colors kept bursting out of King Yongqiu's body. As a king of the imperial clan of Diyu dynasty, he had countless life-saving spirit items and treasures. But whether they were spirit talismans, bone armors, life-saving puppets, or other mystic arts, they were all either shattered by Lu Bang's hand holding the pearl, or cut in half by the sword in his left hand. Muffled sounds of bombardment could be heard coming from King Yongqiu's body. What King Yongqiu cultivated was a secret cultivation technique of Diyu dynasty, the Panga True Body, and his fleshly body was now shockingly strong. But under Lu Bang's attack, King Yongqiu's bones and tendons were broken, and his body was pierced in several places by the sword in Lu Bang's hand. The sharpness of the sword left one speechless. On several occasions, if King Yongqiu had not moved his body, the sword would have pierced through his vital parts and killed him on the spot. Lu Bang laughed in a deep voice. King Yongqiu, what gives you the right to be so presumptuous in front of me? Just because you are a member of Diyu dynasty? A loud dragon roar rang out as Lu Bang laughed and said, Lao Tzu is also a human emperor. In front of Lao Tzu, you are nothing. Then he lashed out with a heavy kick and slapped King Yongqiu in the face. The sound of bones breaking rang out as King Yongqiu's cheekbone and upper ribs were shattered. A great amount of blood mixed with broken pieces of flesh sprayed out of his mouth. Howling miserably, King Yongqiu was knocked flying hundreds of miles away like a cannonball, leaving a white trail in the air that was visible to the naked eye. Wuxia was frightened by the sight. He estimated the power of Lu Bang's kick, and knew that if it had landed on Wuxia, his body would have been turned into nothingness in an instant, leaving not even ashes behind. The power of the kick had reached the limit of some kind of power, and if it went one step further, it would reach a realm that Wuxia could not comprehend for the time being. Suddenly, the golden armor disappeared, and Lu Bang, who looked mighty just a moment ago, fell to the ground with a pale face. Beauties, help me, he screamed. I'm cramping all over. Bastard. I can't use divine abilities that are not cultivated by myself. Every time I use them, I get cramps all over my body. Help me. My balls hurt, I'm cramping there too. The female immortals who had been controlled by King Yongqiu with restrictive magic staggered to their feet from the ruins around them. Pu Lao's roar had not only shattered Yuya City and the entire military camp, but had also left them coughing up blood and covered in wounds. However, King Yongqiu did not really harm their immortal souls, but only temporarily controlled them. So when they heard Lu Bang's howl, they were still able to struggle to their feet. A group of female immortals covered in blood threw themselves onto Lu Bang and skillfully massaged Lu Bang's tendons and bones. Lu Bang's face turned purple with pain, and he kept howling, trembling all over. A fierce gleam flashed across Yu Gu's face as he slowly raised his right hand. Countless oracles floated down from the supreme tower in the sky, and muffled footsteps could be heard coming from all directions as a large number of Diyu's soldiers lined up in battle formations approached from all directions. One after another, the decks of the flying ships in the sky were removed, revealing various war machines that gleamed brightly inside. Some of the oracles began to recite incantations and sing ancient ballads to summon ghosts and deities. A deep, ferocious laugh came from a distance as King Yongqiu flew back, his bones broken and tendons torn. Angel Lu Bang, what kind of show are you playing? Are you seriously injured and waiting to be killed? Is this how you look like? Jing Mo is one of your men? Hee, you can fool others but you can't fool me. The army had completely surrounded them. Twitching all over, Lu Bang tilted his eyes at King Yongqiu and showed no intention of talking to him. Yu Gu clenched his fists. Just as he was about to give the order to capture Lu Bang and the others alive, a beam of golden light suddenly sprinkled down from the sky. For a moment, an immortal tune was heard, and countless golden petals fell from the sky like a snowstorm. Amidst the golden light, a hazy figure shrouded in purple mist drifted down with a golden scroll in his hand. King of Han Lu Bang, receive the decree. Hovering in the sky, the purple figure said coolly, this is the decree of the great heavenly venerate. The matter of myriad immortal alliance will be solved by Diyu himself. As the immortal king of the celestial court, Lu Bang, the king of Han, should protect the interests of the celestial court. What does the dispute between Diyu and myriad immortal alliance have to do with the celestial court? This matter is settled, and no one in the celestial court is allowed to interfere in it. The purple figure threw away the golden scroll, then fished out a piece of black jade the size of a child's arm from under his sleeve, and threw it to King Yongqiu. The human emperor has decreed that no subject of Du is allowed to make things difficult for King of Han and his party. Anyone who dares to disobey will have his entire clan executed. King Yongqiu took the black jade with a blank expression. A beam of light shot out from his forehead and touched it. Then he gave a cold snort, spun, and disappeared into the supreme tower hovering in the sky. Yu Gu, the old oracle, also gave the purple figure a few glances with a flicker in his eyes. At last, he did not have the courage to violate the human emperor's decree, so he bowed his head, transformed into a gust of black wind, and flew back into the supreme tower. Wuqi looked curiously at the purple figure. The reaction of the celestial court was very strange. The celestial court was not going to interfere in the matter between Myriad Immortal Alliance and Du. Didn't that mean the immortals of the alliance were being slaughtered by Du? Myriad Immortal Alliance was just a collection of itinerant cultivators on Pangu continent. How could they fight against the officials of Du? Lu Bang, who was screaming in pain a moment ago, jumped to his feet in high spirits. He raised his hands and cried out joyfully, "Great Heavenly Venerable, you are wise. Lao Tzu has long wanted to leave this mess behind. Wouldn't it be better to go to Liangzhu and enjoy life as soon as possible?" Laughing wildly, Lu Bang clapped his hands and said, "Fan Kuai, prepare the ceremonial array and return to Liangzhu." Wu Qi pondered for a moment, then flew lightly up into the sky with a gust of wind and headed straight for the supreme tower. Ao Buzin was startled by Wu Qi's bold move. Chapter 627. In the air, Wu Qi, hiding in a speck of dust, slowly reached out a hand and sprinkled a wisp of drunken dragon incense, which he had concocted after he arrived on Pangu continent, into the pool. Wu Qi did not use too much of the drunken dragon incense, which was enough to make a true dragon of gold immortal realm drunk, and he only sprinkled 3 kilograms of it into the pool. He transformed into a gale and flew a few provinces in the sky, then transformed into a dragon python and burrowed into the ground, swimming far away with the help of water veins. Finally, he transformed into an ancient maze and scuttled in the ocean for a long time. At last, Wu Qi found a deserted island in the middle of the ocean, and dragged the unconscious King Yongqiu into a reef cave on the coast of the island. Without waiting for King Yongqiu to answer, Wu Qi slapped him dozens of times in the face. Then he shook King Yongqiu's body, accompanied by a rumble that sounded like a muffled thunderclap. All the joints of King Yongqiu's broken skeleton were dislocated. Apart from his skull, even his spine was broken into pieces. Fearing that King Yongqiu's cultivation base was too strong, and he had a mystic art that could burn his blood essence to heal his soul quickly, Wu Qi injected a wisp of divine flame of order into all his bones and joints. If he dared to reattach his bones, the flame would burst out and refine his bones. As for why the guards in the Supreme Tower were so lax, there must be a reason for that. Countless oracles were stationed outside the Supreme Tower, and an army of 100,000 soldiers had set up camp down below. Moreover, the Supreme Tower's reputation was well known to everyone. Each Supreme Tower represented an existence as strong as a primordial immortal, who would dare to sneak into the Supreme Tower and do whatever they wanted. Those who had the strength to do so were all of the same status as Yu Gu, and they were always upright and above board. So, how could they do what Wu Qi was doing now? King Yongqiu opened his eyes and asked curiously, "That Han Xian is just one of the 3 clones? Interesting, he is the backer of the Celestial Court. How could those few old fools teach him their special divine ability? It seems that this Lu Bang is one of their trusted subordinates?" Yu Gu frowned and said in a deep voice, "How could I know if you don't know? The immortals of the Celestial Court are cunning, sinister, and ruthless. I'm sure they have countless backup plans. I'm good at trickery. So, you have to figure out what they want to do." Glancing around cautiously, Wu Qi slowly descended to the pond and carefully moved King Yongqiu out of it. This time, Wu Qi dared not to be careless. He did not dare to use a divine ability like the Quafu chasing the sun step, which would leave behind obvious traces. Instead, he retracted all his aura, and with the help of the force of nature, He let the wind carry him up into the sky. Then, he transformed into a gale and fled tens of thousands of miles away in the blink of an eye. King Yongqiu sighed, closed his eyes and said feebly, "I didn't expect that Liu Bang still had a trump card." Yu Gu nodded, then transformed into a gust of black wind and flew out of the door. A cough rang out as King Yongqiu spat out a few clots of blood from his mouth. He gasped for breath as his tense body slowly relaxed. Wuxia slapped King Yongqiu in the face and cried out in a deep voice, "Now I'll ask you questions and you'll answer them. If you don't answer, you'll die and I'll leave. Do you understand?" There was a formation constructed with fire element supreme-grade energy stones at the bottom of the pond, which was constantly providing a high temperature. The water in the pond was bubbling silently, and the temperature was high enough to melt ordinary steel. Lying in the pond with his face submerged in the water, King Yongqiu had a look of enjoyment on his face. The wounds on the surface of his body were slowly healing, and the strong medicinal strength was rushing into his body. With the help of the medicinal strength, the injuries to his bones and internal organs were gradually recovering. Yu Gu pondered for a moment, then rose to his feet and said with a nod, "That's settled then. Your Excellency, the Yu clan is now tied to Your Excellency." Wu Qi simply slapped King Yongqiu in the face again and cried out in a deep voice, "Cut the crap! Who are you?" Inside the Supreme Tower, important buildings such as Diyu's Directorate of Celestials and the military court were dimly lit, the air was blocked, and people could be seen everywhere, as if every inch of space was crowded with all kinds of dead souls. Maids and servants dressed in long black robes quietly walked through the corridors, delivering all kinds of items according to the requests of the nobles in Tongtian Tower. King Yongqiu was taken aback. He was almost driven mad by Wu Qi's question. The magical water in the pond had worked miraculously, digesting all the medicinal strength of the drunken dragon incense in an instant, and injecting it into King Yongqiu's body. King Yongqiu, who was trying his best to regulate his breathing and repair the damage in his body, fell into a deep sleep without even knowing what had happened. The magical pond instantly spread the medicinal strength of the drunken dragon incense throughout King Yongqiu's body, at least 100 times faster than breathing with his nose. Thanks to all sorts of coincidences, Wu Qi easily knocked King Yongqiu out with 3 kilograms of drunken dragon incense, then used a restrictive magic to hide him in his sleeve. After that, he continued to transform into a speck of dust and slowly flew out of the Supreme Tower along the airflow. Yu Mu sneered and shook his head. It's not just that Liu Bang. The few people around him are not simple either. Take the man who controlled you with an eye technique for example. The divine ability he cultivates, the heavenly forging divine technique, is rarely passed down in the celestial court. As for that Han Xian Hehe, judging from his appearance, he should be just one of the 3 clones. After torturing King Yongqiu, Wu Qi changed his appearance and woke King Yongqiu up with the antidote. King Yongqiu slowly sank into the depths of the pond. "I understand," he said in a muffled voice. "Of all the benefits I get, Yu clan naturally has a share. Send an order for me. Ask the Celestial Palace to send a few capable counselors here, especially the descendants of Yu clan who have the blood of Xiang clan in them. They are more capable of dealing with Liu Bang." As soon as he opened his eyes, King Yongqiu let out a furious roar. He tried his best to struggle, but as all his joints were dislocated, 70 to 80% of his bones were broken, and all his acupoints were sealed by the immortal detaining needles, he could not move at all. Yu Gu had retracted all his divine abilities and magic power, and even carefully hid his divine sense in his spiritual ocean, not daring to expose it at all. Wu Qi could understand why he did this. Yu Gu, who was at the end of his life and could kick the bucket at any moment, had to conserve his physical strength and magic power at all times. Any slight consumption could shorten his lifespan. Naturally, he did not want to waste his strength on such a useless thing. Besides, he was seriously wounded by Zhang Liang's sneak attack from behind with a primordial immortal artifact. So how could he possibly use his divine sense to explore the surroundings? Not only that, even Yu Gu, whom Wu Qi dreaded the most, had retracted all his aura after entering the Supreme Tower, and did not even release his divine sense. Wu Qi followed King Yongqiu into the secret chamber, as if he was walking straight into a deserted place. After being brutally beaten by Liu Bang, King Yangqiu's face was disfigured, and most of his bones were broken. As soon as he entered the Supreme Tower, he hid in a secret chamber in the core of the tower, and jumped into a pool that emitted a pungent smell of medicine. The pool measured 30 feet in both width and length, and was made of black jade. The liquid in it was as dark as a gel, and when King Yangqiu moved slightly, the whole pool trembled slightly. His hands moved as fast as lightning, and countless primordial runes flew out of his fingertips, quickly forming 3,600 layers of aura-isolating restrictive spells around him. Then Wuxia quickly fished out 360 immortal detaining needles, and plunged them into all the key acupoints on King Yangqiu's body. Then he bombarded King Yangqiu's acupoints with a heavy blow, dispersing all his meridians. King Yangqiu fainted with a series of slaps. As his fleshly body was extremely strong, the slaps only caused a slight numbness on his face, but the humiliation made him so angry that blood was flowing out of the corner of his mouth. Glaring at Wuxia, he gritted his teeth and roared, "You're dead! You're dead!" King Yangqiu nodded, then closed his eyes again and said, "Master Yu, you may leave now. I'll continue to lead the army to wipe out Myriad Immortal Alliance when I recover from my injury. Since the Celestial Court has made it clear that it will not interfere in the affairs of Yu and Myriad Immortal Alliance, I'll kill them all, and the world will be at peace." When he followed King Yangqiu all the way into the Supreme Tower, Wuxia had the idea of fleeing immediately if something went wrong. But even in his dreams, he didn't expect that Sky-Split Tower didn't have any defensive restrictions at all. The maids and servants inside were all ordinary mortals. The men were handsome and the women were beautiful. Every one of them was carefully selected. Apart from that, there wasn't even a single capable bodyguard. Despite all these preparations, Wuxia still could not rest assured. So he simply produced the Star Shark, transformed it into 7 hair-thin starlight beams, and sent them into King Yangqiu's 7 orifices, locking down his spiritual ocean. Specks of divine flame of order attached themselves to the starlight beams, entangling King Yangqiu's soul. Yugu walked slowly into the secret chamber, and waved his hand to dismiss all the maids. The stone door of the secret chamber was closed, and a beam of black light enveloped it. Yugu sat down beside the pool and asked in a low voice, "How are your injuries?" King Yangqiu suddenly laughed self-deprecatingly. "Of course they are their trusted subordinates," he said, shaking his head and shaking his head. "Otherwise, how could they be the ones who ruined my father's plan?" Interesting. Why did the great celestial venerables send such a supreme figure to Pangu continent, but ignore the affairs of Myriad Immortal Alliance? What are they trying to do? King Yangqiu let out a deep groan. All the medicinal strength of the newly added herbs was extracted by the water in the magical pool, and sent directly into his body. The effect was much faster than taking the herbs himself, and then refining them. All of the medicinal herbs were of the highest quality. They could either greatly strengthen one's vitality or nourish one's blood and qi. Every single one of them was priceless. In the eyes of cultivators, every single one of these medicinal herbs would make them fight for it with all their might. Chapter 628. Wuqi's question was almost idiotic. King Yangqiu glared angrily at Wuxia, his eyes so bloodshot that they seemed to be dripping blood. He had taken a huge risk to kidnap her from Tongtian Tower, and brought her to this pitch-black cave filled with the stench of seawater. He had used countless vicious methods to imprison her movements. Even her soul had been bound with an unknown magic tool, and a flame that emitted a terrifying aura. She didn't even have the strength to fight to the death. After spending so much effort, you actually ask me who I am? Wuxia looked at King Yangqiu with a serious face, then nodded and said with a smile, "Yes, who are you?" King Yangqiu was silent for a long while, and then Wuxia slapped him in the face with all his might to remind him not to waste time. Yugu could find out that King Yangqiu was kidnapped at any time. With his cultivation base equivalent to that of a primordial immortal, and with the various unimaginable mystic arts of Great Yu's oracles, he could find King Yangqiu's whereabouts at any time. Although Wu Qi had sealed off the cave with 3,600 layers of aura-isolating spells, he was not confident that he could isolate Yu Gu's sense of King Yang Qiu. Wu Qi was not worried that he would be locked down by Yu Gu. As an innate chaotic spirit body, it had broken away from the shackles of the Tao of heaven and earth of this world, and in many ways, had transcended the constraints of many laws of heaven and earth. No matter how strong Yu Gu was, it would be difficult for him to find any trace of Wu Qi. But King Yang Qiu was a man of extraordinary status, and he had been blessed with countless strange divine abilities and mystic arts, so Yu Gu could find him at any time. So, Wu Qi slapped King Yang Qiu 8 times with all his strength. With his current strength, Wu Qi could shatter a small star with a single slap. The tremendous force of the slap slammed into King Yang Qiu's face, producing a great deal of sparks. The loud sound of the collision rang like the ringing of a great bell, shaking the entire cave. King Yang Qiu looked at Wu Qi mockingly and said in a low voice, "The cultivation base of the peak of the first Pangu heaven? Such a cultivation base can only tickle me. This king is really curious. What method did you use to kidnap this king here? My cultivation base is at the peak of the 7 stars realm of the second Pangu heaven. Not only did you manage to take me away right under Yu Gu's nose, but you also managed to immobilize me." Wu Qi was speechless. The strength of this fellow's fleshly body was strong enough to compete with an upper-tier gold immortal. There were not many immortals who practiced body cultivation, and the number of immortals who could cultivate to the golden immortal realm was as few as the stars in the sky. However, if one could cultivate his body to the golden immortal realm, he would almost be invulnerable to all evils. Even those stars in the void could easily bathe and play in the core of the stars. The strength of such a body was really despairingly strong. Although Wu Qi had subdued King Yang Qiu, judging from the absolute gap between their cultivation bases, even if Wu Qi hacked at King Yang Qiu with the Star Shark Blade, he would not be able to kill King Yang Qiu. Although Wu Qi had also subdued King Yang Qiu's soul, Wu Qi dared not to act recklessly. Wu Qi had seen all kinds of vicious means used by Diyu's oracles. Who knew if King Yang Qiu's soul was bound with some vicious curse of mutual destruction? If Wu Qi really destroyed King Yang Qiu's soul, perhaps his divine soul would disintegrate immediately. Looking angrily at the fearless King Yang Qiu, Wu Qi's eyes darted back and forth, trying to come up with a way to deal with him. King Yang Qiu twitched the corner of his mouth and said coolly, "You're not bad. It must be a very advanced escape art, right? You also have a secret medicine that can put me in a coma. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been brought here by you. You're a talent, and I'm short of talents like you. Acknowledge me as your master, and I'll guarantee you prosperity and wealth." Without saying a word, Wu Qi rose to his feet and began to untie his trousers. King Yang Qiu's face flickered slightly, and he cried out in a deep voice, "What are you doing?" As he took off his trousers, Wu Qi sneered and said, Fine, I can't do anything to you. Your fleshly body is so strong that you're certainly not afraid of anything like torture. Hee, if I can't kill you, I'll give you a taste of my piss." King Yang Qiu's face suddenly turned green. His eyes went wide as he stared at Wu Qi, who was slowly taking off his trousers, and his pupils constricted to the size of needle tips. In just a fraction of a second, King Yang Qiu bellowed in a deep voice, "I'm King Yang Qiu, the son of King Yang Shan of Diyu." In the face of Wu Qi's almost shameless threat, King Yang Qiu, who had been sheltered since he was a child and had never suffered any setbacks or tribulations, had no choice but to bow his head and admit defeat. He could tolerate being beaten up by Liu Bang in a head-on battle because he was not strong enough, and he still had a chance to get revenge on Liu Bang in the future. But when Wu Qi peed on his head, King Yang Qiu would rather die than suffer such humiliation and torment. His father was King Yang Shan, one of the 18 noblest and most powerful kings of Diyu dynasty, and the half-brother of the current human emperor. King Yang Qiu himself owned a fiefdom in the east of Yuxiong Plain, which was 100 times the size of Zhong province. He was also the general of the east in Liangzhu, commanding 1,000,000 imperial guards of Diyu dynasty, and a large private army with great fighting prowess. King Yang Qiu had just turned 300 years old this year, and his lifespan was far longer than that of ordinary people on Pangu continent, who lived about 100 years on average. When he was 18 years old, he successfully fused with the soul of an adult Pu Lao, which gave him a tremendous soul power, and inherited 70% of the beast's flesh and blood essence. Because of that, his cultivation base progressed by leaps and bounds, and in just over 200 years he had reached the peak of the 7 stars realm of the second Panga heaven, strong enough to fight against a 4th-tier gold immortal. Threatened by Wu Qi's P. King Yongqiu told Wu Qi everything about himself, including his concubine, hundreds of concubines, and more than 100 children. Deeply humiliated by Wu Qi's P. King Yongqiu gnashed his teeth and told Wu Qi all these things, his body trembling with anger. Wu Qi slapped King Yongqiu in the face and said with a cold grin, "Why are you looking for trouble with Liu Bang, the king of Han?" King Yongqiu's eyes flickered. "I'm just venting my father's anger. When my father was working somewhere in the past, Liu Bang, the king of Han, and a group of his subordinates ruined my father's plan, and the situation was reversed. Since he dares to come to DU as an emissary, why can't I look for trouble with him?" As soon as he heard King Yongqiu's words, Wu Qi was immediately sure that the mysterious black-clothed man who had controlled Yandan and others on Earth was King Yongqiu's father, King Yongshan. In the end, Yingzheng unified the world, but the one who won the war was Liu Bang, the king of Han, who was now conferred by the Celestial Court. There was no need to ask about the entanglement of grievances and all kinds of intrigues. The fact that King Yongqiu had come to Liu Bang in such an aggressive manner today showed how much he hated Liu Bang, and how much King Yongshan had suffered at Liu Bang's hands in those years. After pondering for a moment, Wu Qi continued, "It has been more than a year since Liu Bang, the king of Han, took over the throne of the Celestial Ambassador. Why are you looking for trouble with him today?" King Yongqiu looked at Wu Qi as if he were looking at an idiot. "Aren't I looking for trouble with the Celestial Ambassador for no reason?" he said with a cold grin. "The assassination of the Celestial Ambassador has given me the best excuse to come to Yuya City." King Yongqiu sneered and snapped in a low voice, a little annoyed. "That Liu Bang, the king of Han, is pretending to be assassinated. Even if I kill him on the spot, I'll always have an excuse to get away with it later. After all, he was the one who set me up first. I can always say that he is from Myriad Immortal Alliance, and even if I kill him on the spot, I'll still have something to say. But I can't believe that Liu Bang, the king of Han, has such a cultivation base. How hateful." Wu Qi nodded slowly. So this was the reason why King Yongqiu had come to Liu Bang? It was a pity that he was beaten up before he could teach Liu Bang a lesson. Then the edict of the Celestial Court and the human emperor suddenly came down, and King Yongqiu could do nothing but sigh helplessly, unable to do anything to Liu Bang. With both hands holding up the waistband of his trousers, Wu Qi asked King Yongqiu a lot of questions, even asking him whether he had wet his bed when he was a child. For more than 2 hours, King Yongqiu was overwhelmed by Wu Qi's strange questions. He stared at Wu Qi with gritted teeth, looking as if he wanted to chew Wu Qi up and eat him alive. Then Wu Qi slapped King Yongqiu twice in the face and said coolly, "Just now, you said that the restrictive spell you used to control those female immortals in the tent was the Black Celestial Forbidden Curse. Is it really as magical as you described?" King Yongqiu smiled proudly and said in a cold voice, "Those female immortals look normal now, but they are already under my control." Wu Qi's eyes flickered as he chuckled and said, "Very well, it's a good spell. Teach me it, and you'll be able to leave here safely. Otherwise..." King Yongqiu was taken aback. He looked at Wu Qi in surprise, shook his head and said, "The immortal energy of an immortal can't drive this spell." Wu Qi twitched the corner of his mouth. Forcibly controlling his heartbeat, he cried out in a deep voice, "You don't have to worry about this. Hand over all the incantations and runes of this spell, and I'll let you leave here safely. Otherwise..." The 7 starlight beams transformed from starshark flashed, and a wisp of divine flame of order slightly burned King Yongqiu's soul. King Yongqiu howled in pain, and his face suddenly turned pale. Gritting his teeth, he stared at Wu Qi for a long while, then spat out the incantations and runes of the Black Celestial Forbidden Spell, as well as various mystic techniques one word at a time. King Yongqiu did not take the Black Celestial Forbidden Curse seriously, but Wu Qi almost cheered out loud. How many things could he do with the black obsidian forbidden soul curse? But King Yangqiu was a decisive man, and he handed over the incantations without hesitation. Noticing the subtle change in Wu Qi's expression, King Yangqiu's eyes flickered as he asked suddenly, "You are King Zhangqiu's subordinate, aren't you?" Wu Qi was taken aback, and he looked at King Yangqiu in surprise. King Zhangqiu has always suspected that I've used the Black Celestial Forbidden spell to control his subordinates, King Yangqiu said to himself. So he has been trying to get his hands on the spell. But it comes from the celestial fiend Lao Ai, who is worshipped by my father, so he can never get his hands on it. Seeing the astonished expression on Wu Qi's face, King Yangqiu said with more confidence, "What he can give you, I can give you 100 times more. Be my subordinate, and I'll definitely put a talent like you in an important position." Wu Qi's astonishment was beyond description. Chapter 629. Faced with King Yangqiu's invitation, Wu Qi was about to reply when his heart suddenly twitched. A huge amount of blood rushed to his head, and a feeling of uneasiness rose in his heart. Not daring to be careless, Wu Qi gave King Yangqiu a fierce glare, then quickly glanced at the storage ring on his finger that was gleaming with a faint dark light. In the end, he did not dare to take it off, so he twisted his body and transformed into a wisp of smoke, vanishing without a trace. King Yangqiu stared at Wu Qi in surprise and murmured to himself, "If I had told you that I could scare you away by recruiting you, why did I have to suffer this humiliation?" Frowning, King Yangqiu gritted his teeth and said, "King Zhangqiu, you son of a bitch. I can't believe you have someone like this as your subordinate. Good, very good. I'll find him and get my hands on him. You bastard. You left me here. What should I do now? What should I do?" The star shark blade that had entangled King Yangqiu in his spiritual ocean had disappeared with Wu Qi's escape, but the immortal detaining needles were still tightly entangling his body. King Yangqiu could not use any strength at all. His limbs and bones were shattered by Wu Qi, and his aura was scattered by a powerful technique. All he could do was lie in the dark underwater cave and sigh. After about a quarter of an hour, countless ghostly wails and wolf howls suddenly rang out in the surroundings. A ferocious and tyrannical aura came whistling down from the sky. Vaguely, a ferocious-looking beast that looked like a true dragon, but had a shorter body than a slender and graceful true dragon could be vaguely seen flashing past. King Yangqiu was overjoyed. He recognized the beast. It looked exactly like Yazi, the beast soul of Yugu. The 3,600 layers of restrictive spells that isolated aura and sound that Wu Qi had laid out shattered with a boom. Huge waves as high as 100 miles were thrown into the surroundings, and dozens of nearby islands were shattered. The wave lifted King Yangqiu high into the air, and a cold divine sense swept through him. Then a big skinny hand tore through the void, grabbed King Yangqiu, and dragged him over to the other side. Yugu finally found that King Yangqiu was not in his supreme tower, and no one knew where he had gone. Shocked, he immediately used his strongest power to search for King Yangqiu's whereabouts. Following the protective spell he had left in King Yangqiu's soul, Yugu found King Yangqiu's approximate location almost immediately. Without hesitation, he used his divine ability to travel hundreds of millions of miles across, destroying all the islands and shallow seabed within 1,000 miles with one palm strike, and rescuing King Yangqiu. Thousands of miles away, Wu Qi, who had transformed into a primordial mystifying Hoenn, spat out a large amount of mirage qi to conceal his presence, looked at the Yazi shadow that was rushing down from the sky and could not help but sigh. The Supreme Oracle, the ultimate deterrent of the Diyu dynasty, could still display such mighty power from hundreds of millions of miles away. The power of such an almighty expert was truly enviable. Just now, when he was in the cave, his heart suddenly contracted and his blood and energy fluctuated. It was the divine ability of divine sense that was often used by the ancient immortals. Although his magic power and cultivation base were still at the realm of heaven immortal, the scroll of stealing he was cultivating, the Song of Gale, the Dark Water scripture, the Inferno Hellfiend scripture, and other scriptures were all top-grade mystic arts from the immortal sections. In fact, his cultivation base had surpassed his current cultivation base, and he had broken through the realm of heaven immortal, with the cultivation base of a gold immortal. Even if he had just stepped through the threshold of the realm, Wuxia would have this kind of divine sense of foreboding when a crisis that concerned his vital interests came. Relatively speaking, King Yangqiu's fleshly body was extremely strong, and his overall strength was strong enough to compete with the strongest gold immortals. However, human warriors did not cultivate their souls or form their nascent divinities, so they could not practice any divine ability. That was why Wuxia was able to plot against King Yangqiu, and even kidnap him without any warning from King Yangqiu. This was the reason why Wuxia was able to plot against King Yangqiu, and even kidnap him without any warning. Originally, Yugu could have sensed Wuqia's kidnapping, but as his life was coming to an end, he dared not to waste even a little bit of his strength. He had been restraining his divine ability and magic power at all times, and was no different from an ordinary old man. No matter how powerful his divine ability was, it could only protect his own safety, and he could not take care of King Yangqiu. Hiding in the Shun, Wuxia had calculated all the karmic entanglements clearly. He took a deep breath and felt that his Tao heart was smooth and bright, as if he had gained a deeper understanding of all kinds of karmic entanglements. He glanced at the turbulent sea in front of him, and without any hesitation he immediately transformed into a gale and soared into the sky. Bringing with him a large tornado, he soared millions of miles into the sky, then turned into a gust of wind and sped toward Zhong province. King Yangqiu mistook me for King Zhangqiu's man? It's a great misunderstanding. Wuxia did not have a good impression of King Zhangqiu, nor did he have a bad impression of him. After all, he and Lord Longyang were now in an ambiguous relationship, and Wuxia had no idea if the two of them had developed some kind of relationship that was beyond friendship. But Lord Longyang was Wuqia's secret ally, and King Zhangqiu had more or less entangled with Wuqia's interests. By letting King Yangqiu and King Zhangqiu fight each other and muddy the waters, Wuxia was wondering if he could get more benefits from it. For the next 6 months, Wuxia stayed in a secluded cultivation in East Sea County of Hai Province, using the excuse that he was injured by Madman Shui with the Mao and Eye Pearl as an excuse. During this time, he was either enjoying the beautiful scenery with Princess Zhonglu, meditating with Princess Zhonglu, personally training the soldiers in battle formations, seizing the natural energy in the spirit caves to improve his magic power and cultivation base, or helping Eugene mine the energy veins in Hai Province and collect an enormous amount of energy stones and immortal stones. All in all, he was very busy. Half a year of hard work had given Wuxia a very fruitful result. First of all, his magic power and cultivation base had taken another step forward, and he was not far away from the peak-level heaven immortal realm, while all his divine abilities had been greatly improved. Secondly, the Luo clan had been moved to an E county by Wuxia and incorporated into the Underhand sect. With the excellent immortal cave abode in Mount Picking Star, the support of the immortal energy veins, and the endless supply of immortal stones, energy stones, and all kinds of spirit herbs, the cultivation base of the Luo clan and the demons Wuxia had subdued had improved by leaps and bounds, which was very different from before. An Lu County and an E County were now under Wuqia's control. All the officials were either impersonated by celestial fiend puppets, subdued by Wuxia with violence and money, or slaughtered by the rebels of Myriad Immortal Alliance, and replaced them with the elites of the scouting office. The Underhand sect had been developing in a low profile in Mount Picking Star. As long as they did not take the initiative to provoke others, who would know that there were so many cultivators cultivating in seclusion in Mount Picking Star. With Wuqia's cover, the army of Zhong province never got close to an E county. Other places in Zhong province were filled with blood, but an E county and an Lu county, as their names suggested, had become a rare peaceful place in this chaotic time. The army of Hai province had secretly expanded to 50,000 soldiers. Wuxia and Su Qin had used all kinds of means to control these people. It was nothing more than a stick and a carrot, and they had completely turned these 50,000 soldiers into their most loyal subordinates. Taking advantage of the Great Yu Army's attack on Myriad Immortal Alliance, Wuqia's celestial fiend puppets of Hai Province had disguised themselves as peddlers of Hai Province, purchasing a large number of immortals and itinerant cultivators with a huge amount of money. They were going to carry out a large-scale blood sacrifice in the future to improve the overall strength of these 50,000 new soldiers. During the 6 months that Wuxia had been in seclusion, nearly 1,000 of the provinces under Diyu's rule had turned into battlefields. As the saying went, when immortals fought, mortals suffered. This saying was well proven on Pangu continent. The generals of the human race and the gold immortals of Myriad Immortal Alliance could turn an area tens of thousands of miles around into dust with just a casual strike. Although they did not have the power of the ancient almighty experts, and did not have the ability to seriously injure Pangu continent, their attacks were enough to kill countless mortals. In particular, there were countless immortals from the Fiend League, Evil League, Ghost League, and Demon League in Myriad Immortal Alliance. These immortals were cruel and tyrannical. Taking advantage of the war, they slaughtered mortals and collected astronomical souls to refine all kinds of evil magical artifacts. For a time, the people in these provinces, which were the battlefields, were plunged into misery and suffering. The miserable scenes could not be described in words. When the 3,000 immortals from the Fiend League joined forces and killed all the people in a 7th-grade province under Zhong Province's rule, while the punitive army was preoccupied, the souls and blood essence of hundreds of millions of mortals were extracted and refined into an extremely powerful fiend artifact, the Fiend Eye's soul dispersing mirror. With the help of this terrible magical artifact, which concentrated the souls and blood essence of hundreds of millions of people, the war between Diyu Dynasty and Myriad Immortal Alliance reached a real climax. The human emperor, who presided over Liangzhu, flew into a rage. Imperial edicts were sent to many provinces under his rule like snowflakes. Chi assembled his troops in all the provinces under Diyu Dynasty's rule, and many princes, dukes, and other great nobles reorganized their private armies as well. Then they launched an aggressive attack on all the itinerant cultivators on Pangu continent. Whether they were allies of Myriad Immortal Alliance or not, wherever Diyu Dynasty pointed its knife at, all the cultivators were killed. The great celestial emperor of the celestial court had long issued a decree that the power of the celestial court would never interfere in the war on Pangu continent. Taking advantage of the war, the disciples of the Buddhist League were happily recruiting believers from all over the world. Great Yu had no time to pay attention to these seemingly harmless cultivators of the Buddhist League, and just waved the butcher's knife at those unlucky fellows from the Tao League. For a moment, Pangu continent was in a mess, and everyone felt precarious. As more and more itinerant cultivators were killed, Myriad Immortal Alliance, who was driven to desperation, launched a series of deadly attacks. Several elders of the Divine Hall personally summoned tens of thousands of huge stars from the void to bombard Pangu continent, putting the officials of Diyu Dynasty in a sorry state. But at the same time, they hated Myriad Immortal Alliance even more. Sitting in East Sea City, Wuxia listened quietly to the various intelligence reports sent back by his scouting office. Suddenly he burst out laughing. The time has come. My father-in-law and the others can come to Pangu continent now. Such a chaotic situation was a great opportunity for the elites of the warring states period to show their talents. Chapter 630. Yes, the time had come. After spending a long time on Pangu continent, apart from forming his innate chaotic spirit body, recruiting a group of subordinates, and owning a small territory, Wuxia had almost nothing else to offer. It was true that he had all the memories and experiences of Wu Wang and Lu Xiaobai, but their experiences were limited. One could not expect Wu Wang and Lu Xiaobai to have the ability and boldness to dominate the world. Pangu continent was a vast place with countless outer heavenly realms, as well as countless almighty experts and almighty experts. How could Wuxia alone make a firm foothold in such a wonderful world? In this world, a lone ranger was always the first to die. Up in the sky, Wuxia had inherited his legacy, Reverend Gale, a mighty primordial immortal. But he was all alone and did not have many subordinates. When the Eastern Green Emperor struck him with a thunderous strike and mobilized dozens of ancient gods to besiege him, no matter how mighty his cultivation base was, he was still killed in the end, and even his roof tiles were dug out. Therefore, one must have subordinates, a loyal confidant, and a power of his own. Apart from the civil and military officials of Great Yan, who else could Wuqi rely on now? These people were all heroes and mighty figures. By bringing them to Pangu continent, taking advantage of the time when Diyu dynasty and myriad immortal alliance were at war, Great Yan would be able to lay down its foundation on Pangu continent and secretly swallow a large piece of territory. In fact, not only Great Yan but also Qin, Zhao Wei, Chu and Qi. As long as he had the black celestial forbidden curse, Wuqi could pull them to his side. Why did the 6 dynasties have to fight and kill each other? Why could they not form a stable alliance of interests? Wuqi speculated maliciously that it would be interesting if he could establish an Earth Federation on Pangu continent. With this in mind, Wuqi immediately came out of seclusion and submitted an official document to Bo Yunting, who was in command of the army. He told him that he had fully recovered and was now returning to the army with 300 elite soldiers from East Sea County, ready to teach those rebels a lesson. Bo Yunting admired a general like Wu Qi, who was brave and good at fighting, and returned to the army as soon as he recovered from a serious injury. So he immediately promoted Wu Qi by 1 grade, officially making Wu Qi a 3rd-grade general in Diyu army, and put him in charge of conquering the mountains southwest of Zhong province with 10,000 soldiers. Therefore, leading the army of 10,000 soldiers, Wu Qi bumped head-on into a group of fiend immortals who were besieging Green Ridge City in Myriad Mountains County southwest of Zhong province. Like Yuya City in Huangsha province, Qingling City was the most important producer of rare metals in Zhong province. The mountains that stretched for millions of miles in Wanshan province contained endless metal veins, including several kinds of rare spirit items that were indispensable for immortals to craft supreme-grade gold immortal artifacts. Therefore, Qingling City had become the most populous county in Zhong province. It was divided into 38 districts, each consisting of hundreds of towns, large and small, with a total population of more than 300 million. Of these 300 million people, 99% made their living from the ore veins, except for a very small number of officials and soldiers. Every day, the mountains of Wanshan province were filled with red light, and the flames in the huge stone furnaces that stood 1,000 feet tall burned fiercely. Countless metal ores were sent into the furnaces, and the red molten metal rushed rapidly through the pipes that were dozens of feet in diameter, eventually converging in a large man-made pool in front of the heart of Qingling City. The pool, which was built by tens of thousands of oracles from Zhong province's Directorate of Celestials with their divine abilities in magic, measured 100 miles in both width and width, and was about 10 miles deep. Red and scorching waves rolled in the pool day and night, while a huge amount of molten metal shot out of the huge pipes and poured into the pool, producing loud noises that sounded like the ringing of a bronze bell. A small flying ship made of jade, shaped like a leaf, hovered over the pool. A large number of oracles sprinkled a rain of light into the pool with various spirit talismans in their hands, while various spells absorbed the various metals in the waves and extracted the pure molten metal from the water. The molten metal, without any impurities, glowed in various colors and shot out of the pool like dragons, rushing into the huge magical storage artifacts hovering in the sky with deafening rumbles. Every large storage artifact could contain a small hill of metal ingots. A small part of these metal ingots would be sent to Zhong province to be used by the craftsmen working under the military court to forge all kinds of weapons, but over 90% of the rare metals would be sent to Liangzhu, where the craftsmen working under the military court would forge all kinds of weapons with amazing lethality. The amount of rare metals produced in Qingling City every day was enough to frighten any top-tier heaven immortal to death with a heart attack, enough to make any gold immortal drool, and enough to make any primordial immortal green with envy, wishing that he could bring his men and occupy the city. Every 10 days, the rare metals produced here were enough for a primordial immortal to gather the materials needed to forge a primordial immortal artifact. This was the reason why Pangu continent was so rich in natural resources, and it was one of the reasons why the immortals were always coveting it. Today Qingling City had become a ghost town. Apart from its core city, which still had a thin layer of defensive formation to withstand the storm-like attacks, the other 37 cities and thousands of towns had been completely destroyed. The pipes that usually spewed out a vast amount of molten metal had cooled down, and the alloy liquid had condensed in them, completely blocking the costly pipes. In the large pond in front of Qingling City, the molten metal had already solidified into a large iron ingot that was as smooth as a mirror. The edges of this large lump of metal had turned greenish-black, and only a faint red glow could be seen flickering at its core. Faint wisps of hot air could be seen rising from it. All the flying ships hovering over the pool had been destroyed, and the corpses of the oracles who were responsible for refining various rare metals were strewn across the mountains. Some of them were gnawed to pieces, as if tens of thousands of rats had ravaged them. High up in the sky, there were hundreds of millions of shadowy figures. These shadowy figures had no faces, and their twisted and deformed limbs were stretched out. Like countless thin fishing lines, they rained down from the sky and bombarded the defensive formation above Qingling City. The people of the 37 cities and thousands of towns were gathered here. They had been refined into evil spirits of the Fiend League, and now they were the vanguard of the attack on Qingling City. The minds of all the evil spirits had been wiped out, leaving only the most instinctive greed and ferocity. Waving their deformed limbs, they attacked the formation with all their might. Each of their attacks only had the force of 1,000 kilograms, but when hundreds of millions of evil spirits attacked at the same time, the defensive formation of Qingling City burst into countless tiny light spots, shaking the surrounding mountain ridges, and causing the people who were lucky enough to survive in the city to scream in fear. More than 30 grotesquely shaped Fiend League immortals hovered in the sky, letting out shrill cries complacently. 36 long banners, each tens of feet tall, hovered in the sky, spraying out millions upon millions of wisps of dark smoke, each of which was connected to an evil spirit of the Fiend League. These Fiend League immortals gently waved the banners in their hands. Every time they did so, the evil spirits would change their positions in the void, communicating with the murderous aura that filled the void and bombarding Qingling City. When Wuxia came to Qingling City on a flying ship with 10,000 soldiers, he happened to see the defensive formation over the city, let out a shrill wail. Dozens of oracles, who were struggling to support the formation, fell to the ground with blood spraying out of their bodies, while the limbs of hundreds of millions of evil spirits, which were twisted by billions of them, immediately shot down into the ground like tiny threads, piercing into the bodies of these oracles. In just a blink of an eye, 3 moon oracles and more than 40 star oracles were sucked dry by the evil spirits, howling miserably. Hundreds of millions of evil spirits let out shrill cries as they converged into a dense stream of dark light and plunged into Qingling City. At the prow of the flying ship, Wuxia let out a shrill cry. With a wave of his hand, the 100 moon oracles and 1,000 star oracles who came with the army raised their hands at the same time and began to chant the sacrificial ballad of the Directorate of Celestials. A vast amount of energy rushed out of these oracles and condensed into a faintly discernible fiend god, who had 3 heads, 12 faces and 36 arms, spitting flames from his mouth, and a long serpent coiled around his body. The fiend god, who stood 10,000 feet tall, waved his arms and intertwined into 18 bizarre beads, which formed a double wheel in front of him, 6 on the inside and 12 on the outside. Then, it shot down amidst a great plume of green flame, and hit the hundreds of millions of evil spirits that were about to rush into Qingling City. Countless wails rang out as nearly half of the evil spirits, who were caught off guard, were wiped out in an instant. The fiend god summoned by the oracles was the projection of a fiend god from the Soul Devourer clan, who was famous for devouring evil spirits in the outer heavenly realms. When these evil spirits came together, they possessed a very strong power, but individually, they were still extremely fragile. Therefore, they had achieved great success with just one strike. The 30-odd fiend immortals who controlled these evil spirits flew into a rage. With a wave of the banners in their hands, the hundreds of millions of evil spirits immediately let out shrill cries and flew toward Wuxia and his companions, leaving behind streams of light. Wuxia waved his hand again. The deck in front of the flying ship opened up, from which came dozens of god-stunning crossbows made by Diyu himself. Muffled booms rang out as 108 crossbows, each as thick as a human head and tens of feet long, shot whistling through the air toward the fiend immortals with a blinding light. Miserable shrieks rang out as more than half of the fiend immortals were killed on the spot. Only 3 of them with the strongest cultivation base rolled up the 18 banners, transformed into black smoke and fled into the sky. The remaining evil spirits swooped in, but Wuxia was careless. He accidentally rushed out of the flying ship and was swept into the torrent of evil spirits. Nearly 100 million evil spirits rushed into Wuxia's spiritual ocean and invaded his body. Wuxia's body stiffened and his eyes turned cloudy. He howled and rolled violently with his arms around his head. Then his body twitched violently, and he fell from the sky while foaming at the mouth. The oracles who accompanied him cried out in alarm and rushed toward Wuxia. Chapter 631. In Zhong Province, the military minister of High Province, Tan Lang, was cursed by a fiend immortal, and his soul was trapped by an evil spirit while leading an army to wipe out the rebels of Myriad Immortal Alliance. No medicine could cure him, so he could only receive a false title and some gold, silver, and jewelry, before being sent back to the East Sea City in East Sea County to recuperate. Wuqi's injury was very strange. So strange that even the Sun Oracles serving Bo Yunting could do nothing about it. His soul and the evil spirit were in a mess. If the soul of an ordinary man was the size of a water tank, Wuqi's soul was so dim that it was only the size of a fist. The flame of his soul was suppressed by the evil spirit, and he was in danger of dying at any time. The Directorate of Celestials had all kinds of mystic techniques to cure souls. But when faced with the strange situation of Wuqi's soul and evil spirit, the Sun Oracles could only shake their heads helplessly. None of them dared to save Wuxia, lest they accidentally shatter Wuqi's severely wounded soul. If that happened, there would be no hope for him. On the other hand, those Supreme Oracles, whose cultivation bases were many times stronger than the Sun Oracles, and who definitely had the ability to save Wuxia. Firstly, Bo Yunting did not have the face to ask for help from Supreme Oracles. Secondly, as a mere 3rd-grade Golden Seal General and the military minister of a 9th-grade province, how could he have the face to ask for help from Supreme Oracles? Therefore, Wuxia had no choice but to return to the East Sea City with his strange injury and the huge amount of gold, silver, and jewelry Bo Yunting had given him. After leaving a celestial fiend puppet in the East Sea City to play dead, Wuxia, who was instantly full of vigor, and Princess Zhonglu, changed their appearances and went straight to the Pulyuo heavenly realm using a super long-distance teleportation formation in a 3rd-grade province under Zhong Province's rule. Over 100 million evil spirits that rushed into Wuqi's spiritual ocean had been tightly confined by the cage Wuqi had conjured using the divine flame of order, and was slowly refining and absorbing them. These evil spirits were transformed from the souls of mortals. Each evil spirit had soul power equivalent to more than 10 times that of an ordinary mortal's soul. If he could absorb all of these evil spirits, Wuqi's divine soul would grow to an unimaginable realm. A huge divine soul represented a powerful divine sense, which represented a better comprehension and comprehension ability of the heavenly Tao. The laws of the heavenly Tao were like complex mathematical problems. A cultivator's divine soul was like a calculator, and a cultivator's cultivation method was like a computing program. Wuxia already had an extremely advanced calculation program, such as the Song of Gale, the Dark Een Water Scripture, and the Inferno Hell Fiend Scripture, all of which were top-notch techniques that pointed directly to the heavenly Tao. If he could absorb all of these hundreds of millions of evil spirits, his divine soul would be greatly strengthened, and his understanding of the heavenly Tao would definitely increase by leaps and bounds. Amidst the void, the tunnel formed by the 7-colored light went straight to a place far away. Wuqia and Princess Zhonglu were sitting cross-legged on the silver lotus, their palms clasped together. The chaotic energy in Wuqi's body was connected with the innate divine energy in Princess Zhonglu's body, constantly communicating and transforming with each other. A 5-colored divine ray enveloped both of them, driving the silver lotus throne to keep teleporting forward. Every time the 5-colored divine ray shone brightly, Wuqia and Princess Zhonglu would bring the silver lotus throne forward for a great distance. A distance that would take an ordinary immortal days to travel with the grand universal teleportation formation, was now covered in a single teleportation. Wuqi's chaotic energy was injected into Princess Zhongli's body, fusing with Princess Zhongli's innate divine energy and slowly turning into 5-colored divine rays. Gradually, the power in Princess Zhongli's body was covered with a layer of chaotic energy, and her power became more and more condensed, mysterious and unfathomable. An ancient aura that felt like it came from the beginning of the world slowly spread out from Princess Zhongli's body, and even Princess Zhongli's beautiful face was filled with a sense of holiness and majesty. At the same time, the 5-colored divine rays were injected into Wuqi's body, fusing with Wuqi's chaotic energy. Each of the 5-colored divine rays contained the ancient heavenly gods' understanding of the great Tao of heaven and earth. When the world was first created, the great Tao of heaven and earth was raw, pure, and exposed before the innate living beings. Therefore, these innate living beings were born with incredible power. Although Princess Zhonglu, who inherited the legacy of the ancient heavenly gods, had yet to understand these great Tao laws, her 5-colored divine rays contained these mysterious great Tao laws. Princess Zhonglu had to study these great Tao laws through the 5-colored divine rays. It was like looking at the moon in a mirror. She had to try her best to guess the mysteries within. But Wuqi, with his chaotic energy, directly devoured these 5-colored divine rays, just like a mortal eating or drinking. All the nutrients were directly absorbed by his body. Thus, it was much easier for Wuqi to understand the great Tao laws contained in the 5-colored divine rays than Princess Zhonglu. Recorded in the 5-colored divine rays were the Tao of nature, including wind, thunder, rain, snow, earth, water, fire, wind, the change of seasons, earthquakes, volcanoes, and many other marvelous principles. Gradually, Wuqi digested the 5-colored divine rays that Princess Zhonglu had sent to him. Vaguely, he had merged with the surrounding void. Wuqi's aura had become even more blurry, as if he would completely vanish in the void at any time and truly merge with the universe. Behind Princess Zhonglu, a hazy sphere of aura gradually emerged. This sphere of aura didn't seem to have any color, yet it seemed to contain all the colors in the world. It didn't seem to have any shape, yet it seemed to contain all the shapes in the world, as if everything was born in it. Yet it also seemed to be able to devour and destroy everything in the world. The profoundness of the chaotic energy was clearly seen in the 5-colored divine rays released by Princess Zhonglu. The divine rays already possessed a vast range of divine abilities, but now, they looked even more magical. Wuqi's entire body was enveloped by a few inches thick layer of chaotic energy. Within the faintly discernible layer of chaotic energy, one could vaguely see countless magical lights and shadows flashing. There were volcanic eruptions, roaring tsunamis, raging gales, snowstorms, and all kinds of natural phenomena that existed between the heaven and the earth were vaguely emerging in the light. It was as if his body had become a miniature world, filled with infinite mysteries. The silver lotus throne was absorbing the magical energy from Wuqi and Princess Zhonglu. Gradually, the silver lotus throne turned colorful, and a subtle innate energy could be sensed from it. The origin of this silver lotus throne was extremely powerful, and now, after being contaminated by the energy of Wuqi and Princess Zhonglu, it was gradually transforming into a real innate spirit treasure. From time to time, Wuqi and Princess Zhonglu would speak some mantras, explaining their understanding of the Tao of heaven and earth. The silver lotus thrones beneath them waved their petals happily, cheering like living creatures. As the saying goes, the mantras of the Buddhist League could make a stubborn rock nod its head. While Wuqi and Princess Zhonglu were explaining the Tao of heaven and earth, the silver lotus throne had gained endless benefits. At the core of the silver lotus throne, a wisp of innate spirit consciousness had gradually taken shape, and was gradually transforming into a human body. Because it had been nourished by Princess Zhongli's aura day and night, this wisp of innate spirit consciousness had instinctively used Princess Zhongli's appearance as a template, and made adjustments to its own appearance. Days passed, and the clothes of Wuqi and Princess Zhonglu, who had reached the peak of their cultivation, suddenly vanished into thin air, and the two of them were tightly joined together. Wuqi was lying on the silver lotus throne, his hands locked into a madra and placed on his chest. Princess Zhonglu was sitting on top of Wuqi, her face expressionless, her hands locked into a madra and placed on her dantian. The chaotic energy and innate divine energy converged and exchanged between their bodies, and after 49 days, their bodies suddenly trembled, and a blinding light burst out from the spot where their bodies were joined. Then their essence energy blasted out and merged into one, merging with the chaotic energy and innate divine energy, turning into two immeasurably small objects that weighed billions of tons, emitting a terrifyingly high temperature, and were sent back into their bodies. Wuqi suddenly realized that this was the true foundation of his and Princess Zhongli's great Tao, and all the future achievements of him and Princess Zhongli lay in it. He pressed the madra heavily on Princess Zhongli's chest, while the madra formed by Princess Zhongli was pressed firmly on the spot between Wuqi's eyebrows. For a moment, their spirit and flesh had become one, and their aura had transformed into a ball of golden light, with purple mist rising from it and a Jindan halo surrounding them. Endless heavenly secrets flowed down from the top of their heads, and the objects inside their bodies, which had no volume but were extremely heavy and hot, exploded with a boom, turning into two small worlds inside their bodies. When a cultivator cultivated to the realm of heaven immortal, he or she would be able to create his or her own interstitial space. Those heaven immortals who had profound cultivation base, and had comprehended the great Tao of heaven and earth would create their own interstitial space, either turning it into a cave abode for secluded cultivation, or a Taoist temple for recruiting disciples. Every single heaven immortal who had a powerful backer and a brilliant cultivation technique had created their own interstitial seed. But the divine ability of creating interstitial space was extremely mysterious. If an ordinary heaven immortal did not inherit it, he or she might not be able to comprehend it even if they cultivated to the peak of heaven immortal realm. Among the 10,000 heaven immortals in outer heavenly realms, it would be considered good if one could create his or her own interstitial space. A heaven immortal's interstitial space had to be stabilized by the natural earth veins and energy veins, and could not be carried around unless there was an extraordinary treasure to suppress it. But when one reached the realm of gold immortal, he or she could create an interstitial space inside his or her body and turn it into a world of its own. The Buddhist kingdom in the palm of eminent Buddhas of the Buddhist League, and the heavenly realms created by the almighty experts of the Tao League were all concrete worlds derived from such interstitial spaces. At this moment, as Wuqi and Princess Zhongli cultivated together with their spirit and flesh, they had inadvertently created their own interstitial space inside their bodies and turned it into a small world. Although they did not have the overall strength of a gold immortal, because of the chaotic energy and innate divine energy, they had reached the same realm as a gold immortal. The interstitial world inside Wuqi was a primordial void. It looked very small, but it was actually very vast. At his will, all kinds of wind, rain, thunder, lightning, earth, water, fire, wind, and all kinds of wonders could be seen in it. It was full of endless changes. But the interstitial world inside Princess Zhongli was a real green mountain and beautiful water. It was only about a foot in diameter, but it was very small. There were a small mountain, a small pool of water, a few clouds flying across it, and a gentle breeze blowing. It already had the appearance of a world of its own. Wuqi and Princess Zhongli opened their eyes at the same time. They looked at each other and smiled. Suddenly, a terrible suction burst out from the small world inside them, quickly absorbing the endless natural energy in the surrounding void. Wild with joy, Wuqi and Princess Zhongli immediately used the power of the small world to convert the natural energy into their own energy. In an instant, the silver lotus throne was enveloped by an enormous amount of natural energy, and with a flash, it disappeared without a trace. 2 months later, Wuqi and Princess Zhongli returned to Yuhua Heavenly Realm. Chapter 632. Yuhua Heavenly Realm still looked the same. The magnificent immortal monarch's mansion stood right next to the square where the teleportation formation was located. The bright sunlight shone on the mansion, which was decorated with carved balustrades and jade bricks, jade walls, and golden tiles. It was a magnificent sight that none of the buildings in the Yu dynasty could compare with. The tense atmosphere on Pangu continent did not affect Yuhua heavenly realm at all. Immortals and itinerant cultivators were still strolling lazily in the streets. Some itinerant cultivators with weaker cultivation bases sat listlessly on the edge of the square, with a cloth spread out in front of them as a stall, where they were selling some worthless items. There were also a few itinerant immortals with the cultivation base of heaven immortals walking back and forth among the stalls of these peddlers with serious faces, hoping to stumble upon some rare natural treasures that were as cheap as cabbages. Holding Princess Zhongli's hand, Wuqi nodded with mixed emotions as he looked at the immortals and itinerant cultivators in the distance. The entire Pangu continent gave off an oppressive feeling, extremely oppressive. In the face of the terrible pressure of Great Yu Dynasty, those immortals were living like rabbits under the butcher's knife, always in a precarious situation. Even someone as arrogant as Reverend Yao Yu only dared to establish his own sect in Hai Province, a remote place like Zhong Province. Why didn't he dare to build an immortal market in a vital place like Zhong Province? But when they arrived in outer heavenly realms, whether they were immortals or itinerant cultivators who had yet to register themselves as immortals, they all exuded a sense of laziness and idleness, which was completely different from their peers on Pangu continent. If the immortals and cultivators on Pangu continent were wild wolves desperately seeking survival, then these immortals in outer heavenly realms were tamed lapdogs. They did not have the aggressive aura of their peers on Pangu continent. Holding Princess Zhongli's hand, the two of them walked side by side towards the teleportation formation that led to outer heavenly realms. Before going to meet Yen Dan and the others, Wuqi wanted to settle a score with Patriarch Yuan Hua. In the past, Patriarch Yuan Hua had sent Taoist men and Taoist Qi to ambush Wuqi with a primordial gold talisman, nearly killing Wuqi in the process. In the end, he even forced Princess Zhongli to marry his grandson. How could he let go of such a grudge? Patriarch Yuan Hua, and even the entire Yuan Hua sect, no longer needed to exist. It would only take a short while to travel from Yuhua Heavenly Realm to Pueyuo Heavenly Realm, where Yuan Hua sect was located, using a teleportation formation. It would not delay Wuqi. On the way, he could also visit Minor Heavenly Circle Realm and Myriad Immortals Planet. Since Yuan Hua sect had attacked Wuqi, Patriarch Jiang Yun might have offered the entire Myriad Immortals Planet to Yuan Hua sect. Wuqi wondered what kind of situation the planet was in now. But no matter what Yuan Hua sect had done to Myriad Immortals Planet, even if all the resources on the planet had been looted by Yuan Hua sect, Wuqi would make them spit everything out. Now Wuqi was confident enough to do that. Even if it was just a lower-grade energy stone, they would have to spit it out obediently to Wuqi. At the thought of Patriarch Yuan Hua sending someone to kill him, Wuqi's heart was immediately filled with a strong killing intent. His eyebrows arched up like two sharp swords piercing his temples, and even Princess Zhongli could sense the towering killing intent. Princess Zhongli gave Wuqi a gentle smile and said, "Are you thinking of Patriarch Yuan Hua? Since that unruly Taoist dared to threaten me, I'll have to give him a good explanation." Princess Zhongli pursed her lips into a faint smile. Her eyes flickered like stars as she turned to Wuqi and said, "I'll have to torture his immortal soul and find out where his descendants are. As for his daughters and granddaughters, we can just send them to Great Yan's musical house as military prostitutes. As for his sons and grandsons..." After a brief moment of pondering, Princess Zhongli snorted coldly and said, "Great Yan's imperial palace on Myriad Immortals Planet still needs some eunuchs to clean the toilets. Castrate them and send them to Myriad Immortals Planet to guard the palace." Wuqi shuddered. He gave Princess Zhongli a look and did not say a word. The education Princess Zhongli received since childhood was very different from his. Wuqi had no reason to demand Princess Zhongli with his own moral values. Besides, the way Princess Zhongli dealt with Patriarch Yuan Hua's clan was very satisfying to Wuqi. Therefore, he would do as Princess Zhongli told him. Nodding slowly, Wuqi was about to say yes when Princess Zhongli suddenly clapped her hands and said with a smile, "I can see that the unruly Taoist Yuan Hua is quite handsome. And he must have been a gigolo when he was young. That means there might be some good-looking granddaughters among his granddaughters. Just pick 8 or 10 of them from them. I need a few serving maids. Darling, You might as well take them as your concubines. Wuqi was struck dumb, but Princess Zhongli smiled and said, After all, they are the descendants of that unruly Taoist Yuan Hua. If you are having fun, you can keep them in the mansion for a few more days. When you are tired of them, and they give birth to children, I'll bring them up and sell them to a brothel. It will be cheap, and I can earn back some of the money I need to feed them. Wuqi's face turned stiff. He laughed dryly and said, Zixian, you really have some tricks up your sleeve. Princess Zhongli narrowed her eyes and smiled complacently. She stuck out her chest proudly and raised her delicate chin as she said, Of course. Since I was young, Zixian has been taught a lesson by the nannies in the palace. So, I do have some tricks up my sleeve to manage my family. Both of them were laughing as they walked. Just as they were about to reach the teleportation formation that led to Yuhua Heavenly Realm, two spears suddenly appeared in front of Wuqi, their sharp tips pointing at Wuqi's nose. Take down these two spies. A loud cry rang out. Wuqi was taken aback. Instinctively, he reached out his hand and shielded Princess Zhongli behind him, then fixed his eyes on the front. The two men with the spears were two valiant warriors clad in soft leather armors. Judging from the faint purple mist rising from their bodies, it was obvious that they were practicing the body tempering technique taught by Diyu's army. But their cultivation base was not very strong, only equivalent to a nascent soul cultivator. On Pangu continent, soldiers with this level of cultivation base would be assigned to do odd jobs in the army, helping the soldiers wash their socks and underwear. But it was a different story in outer heavenly realms. Soldiers with the overall strength equivalent to nascent soul cultivators were the main force in the army, and if they had the overall strength equivalent to a heaven immortal, they would be treated as a mighty general. After all, outer heavenly realms were not Pangu continent, where the mysterious purple mist used by human warriors for their cultivation was extremely rare. No matter how good one's aptitude was, there was no way he could improve his overall strength too quickly. Two soldiers stood in front of Wuqi and Princess Zhongli, while heavily armed warriors were slowly approaching from both sides and behind. The man who accused Wuqi and Princess Zhongli of being spies was a lieutenant clad in a bronze armor, with a sword hanging at his waist and a bronze medallion hanging on his belt. Judging from the mark on the medallion, he was a 9th-grade lieutenant, the lowest rank, who could command a squad of 30 to 50 soldiers at most. Wuqi snorted coldly and snapped, Spies? What kind of spies are we? They were in Yuhua Heavenly Realm, the territory of Heavenly Lord Sanyu. Although the Diyu dynasty also had an administrative base here, which was guarded by Yuzong, Marquis Jian, with an army, the garrison of Diyu dynasty in Yuhua Heavenly Realm was more of a symbolic significance. Outer Heavenly Realms had always been the traditional territory of the Celestial Court. In Yuhua Heavenly Realm, Heavenly Lord Sanyu was the real local tyrant. Since when could the human soldiers arrest people at his doorstep? Wuqi looked at the little captain with a puzzled expression. The captain kept glancing at Princess Zhongli's beautiful face with a pair of triangular eyes, while saliva seemed to be dripping from the corner of his mouth. Upon hearing Wuqi's words, the lieutenant sneered and said, What spies? You are the spies of Myriad Immortal Alliance. By the decree of the human emperor, we have the right to arrest any spies who try to spy on the military situation of Diyu dynasty. The lieutenant reached out to grab Wuqi's collar and said with a cold grin, Taoist, you better be obedient and don't move recklessly, lest you bring disaster to yourself. Letting the lieutenant grab his collar, Wuqi turned to Princess Zhongli and said with a smile, It seems you are the one who caused the trouble, Zixian. Princess Zhongli frowned. Suddenly, her pretty face was covered with a faint glow, within which one could vaguely see lightning flashing and thunder rumbling. It was a sign that could only be seen when an immortal had just broken through a bottleneck and stepped into a new realm, and was still unable to control the immortal energy in his body well, thus causing a conflict between his existence and the great Tao of heaven and earth. It would never happen to an immortal who was not a gold immortal or above. Heaven immortals only had a superficial understanding of the great Tao of heaven and earth, and heaven immortals only studied how to use the great Tao of heaven and earth. Gold immortals, on the other hand, had already stepped into a new realm, where they began to study how to distort and change the great Tao of heaven and earth. Therefore, only the immortal energy of gold immortals would conflict with the great Tao of heaven and earth, and thus cause such a sign. The appearance of such a sign on Princess Zhongli's face proved that she had stepped into the realm of gold immortal. As a frog at the bottom of a well in outer heavenly realms, the captain never knew that there were such strange things among the immortals. He gave Princess Zhongli, whose face had become hazy, a surprised look, and said with a giggle, "Someone tie this female cultivator up and send her to Master Marquis's mansion. Let Master Marquis interrogate her personally, and find out what conspiracy they have against Great Yu." Let Yuzong interrogate Princess Zhongli personally? Wuqi understood what was going on. He sneered and said, "Did Yuzong ask you to abduct a civilian girl?" He looked over his shoulder at the tightly shut door of the immortal mansion, where a few immortal officials were hovering in midair, pointing and whispering to each other. But it was obvious that these immortal officials had no intention of interfering. They were just frowning and murmuring something. It suddenly dawned on Wuqi that the edict of the great celestial emperor of the celestial court must have spread across the outer heavenly realms. Now that the lieutenant had labeled him and Princess Zhongli as spies of Myriad Immortal Alliance, even Heavenly Lord San Yu would not dare to violate the edict of the great celestial emperor. Sighing softly, Wuqi shook his head and said, "Since when did Yuzong become so despicable? How could he even abduct a civilian girl?" The lieutenant flew into a rage. He threw a slap at Wuqi and roared, "How presumptuous! How can the title of Marquis Jian be used by a bastard like you?" Before Wuqi could do anything, Princess Zhongli had already kicked the lieutenant 3 inches below his navel. A thunderbolt flashed whistling through the air, and the lieutenant howled miserably as he flew backward, clutching his crotch. Suddenly, a plume of dark smoke rose from the middle of his thigh below his abdomen, and a scorched smell of grilled meat came wafting out. Princess Zhongli had replaced her hand with her leg, delivering a powerful palm thunder to the lower part of the captain's body. The surrounding soldiers of the Yu dynasty were shocked. One after another, they drew their weapons and surrounded Wuqi and Princess Zhongli. Chapter 633. Outside Yuhua Immortal City, in the Yu army camp, in a deep and dim bedchamber, Yuzong was sprinting with all his might on a bed carved out of a boulder and covered with countless brocades and furs. The bed was so soft and smooth that it made one drowsy. On this huge bed that was several tens of feet in length and width, there were over 30 beautiful women lying in a disorderly manner. There were girls from the human race, the feathermen, the longbow people, and even the rare mermen and some other strange races, such as the one-legged, three-eyed, two-faced, and hollow. Almost all the races that existed on Pangu continent could be found on this bed, as long as they were beautiful and had a curvaceous body. Among them, 7 or 8 female cultivators with strong cultivation bases were lying on the bed with tears in their eyes. Their bodies were a mess, and some unknown liquid was smeared all over their bodies and faces. Cold gleams could be vaguely seen flashing on their vital acupoints. Obviously, they had been captured by force, and their magic power was sealed by the immortal detaining spike. One of the female immortals, whose overall strength had reached the realm of heaven immortal, had 3 talismans flashing with a dark gleam stuck on her body, firmly imprisoning her immortal soul in her spiritual ocean. Yuzong sprinted with all his might, panting like an ox. Suddenly his body twitched, and sweat broke out from his body. He panted a few times, then slowly got up from the convulsing girl, then lay down on the body of another girl next to him. A painful moan rang out, and Yuzong continued to sprint with all his might. Ever since Princess Zhongli and Lao Ai killed Yuzong's 3 precious sons on Myriad Immortal's planet, and Wuqi killed his favorite eldest son, Yu Hahuan, in Yuhua Immortal City, Yuzong's bloodline was completely cut off. Flying into a rage out of humiliation, Yuzong had been ordering his generals and soldiers to help him abduct girls and bring them back to the camp, while he worked hard at the fields, hoping to have a few more children. According to the unspoken rules of the Yu dynasty, if he did not have any children, he would never be promoted in this life, and his title of nobility might even be taken away because of this. He was still hoping to leave Yuhua Heavenly Realm, and returned to Penghu continent to live a carefree life. Even being the prefecture overseer of a 9th-grade province on Penghu continent was more comfortable than being the protector of the land in a place like Yuhua Heavenly Realm. This damned place. Immortals and itinerant cultivators everywhere. Panting, Yu Miao ravaged the girl beneath him, gritting his teeth and cursing the parents of Yu Miao, the left minister of Zhong province. When Wu Qi kidnapped Yu Hahuan, Yu Miao had spent all his wealth to hire Yu Miao to kill Wu Qi. Yu Miao took the money and told Yu Miao that the man who killed his son was indeed killed by him. But he could not produce any evidence to prove that Wu Qi was killed by him. Yu Miao always felt that he had spent the money in vain. Without seeing Wu Qi's head, Yu Zong did not believe that Wu Qi was really killed, and he felt that the murderer of his son must still be roaming around somewhere. But Yu Mu was the grand elder of Yu clan in Zhong province, and Yu Zong was just a member of the collateral branch of Yu clan in Zhong province. How could he have the courage to reason with Yu Zong? Left with no other choice, he could only curse Yu Mu's parents on his bed, and pretend that the girl beneath him was Yu Mu's mother to exact his revenge. Just as he was feeling complacent, a healthy girl clad in a soft armor strode into the bedchamber and cried out, "Marquis Jian, we've found a beautiful girl. She is extremely beautiful, and I'm sure she will suit Marquis Jian's taste. She has just come out of the teleportation formation leading to Penghu continent, and she should be an itinerant cultivator who has fled from Penghu continent. The children have already entangled them, but the children can't deal with them." Yu Zong's movement stopped abruptly, and he asked with a deep smile, "Them? That girl is accompanied by a man dressed like a Taoist," the girl said in a deep voice. "He should be her partner." Laughing out loud, Yu Mu rolled to his feet, grabbed a cloak, and wrapped it around his body. "Wonderful. I like those female cultivators who have Taoist companions the most," he said. "Hee, just like these few. Killing their husbands and seizing their wives. How wonderful is that?" Laughing wildly, Yu Zong's figure flickered and he rushed out of the bedchamber. Immediately after that, the entire military camp was thrown into chaos. A large number of soldiers lined up in battle formations, waved banners, and followed Yu Zong to Yuhua Immortal City. In Yuhua Immortal City, a group of about 20 soldiers had been beaten up by Princess Zhonglu, leaving them crawling on the ground. Wu Qi folded his arms before his chest and watched the scene with a smile on his face. Princess Zhonglu rolled up her sleeves and threw punches at the soldiers like raindrops. Her fingers were soft and tender, but each of her punches carried a force that could split mountains. The soldiers' bones and tendons were broken, and even their internal organs were injured by the tremendous force. Princess Zhonglu cultivated the primordial Tao of divinity. As the ancient gods had mastered all kinds of natural phenomena, their divine bodies were very strong, very different from the immortals of today. Princess Zhonglu did not deliberately temper her fleshly body, but as her innate divine energy grew stronger and her cultivation base improved, the force of nature naturally fused with her body, which made her fleshly body stronger. Although she looked like a little girl in her teens, with her extraordinary strength, perhaps even Wu Qi could not teach her as easily as she did. In order to cultivate the true body of heaven and earth scripture, Wu Qi had to work hard to draw the energy into his body and temper his fleshly body with the mysterious purple energy. But Princess Zhonglu did not have to consider this part of her cultivation base at all, and her fleshly body had been improved just like that. With Princess Zhongli's cultivation base, which was very close to that of a gold immortal, these soldiers only possessed the overall strength of ordinary nascent soul cultivators. Although their fleshly bodies were strong, they were only as strong as a lump of pig iron. Therefore, with a series of punches and kicks, they were in a horrible state. Several of their necks were broken, and it seemed that they could no longer breathe. They could only inhale and exhale. Many immortal officials in the immortal abode were looking at them with smiles on their faces, and even a few low-ranking immortal officials in green robes and hats were applauding and cheering. The celestial court forbade all immortal officials from participating in the battle between Yu and Myriad Immortal Alliance. Therefore, Yu Zong had taken this opportunity to do whatever he wanted in Yuhua Immortal City. Over the past 2 years, he had cheated countless female cultivators and immortals. Naturally, Those immortal officials were very happy to see his soldiers being beaten up by a beautiful and delicate female cultivator. Just when a few soldiers could not stand the beating any longer and dropped to their knees, kowtowing and begging Princess Zhongli to let them go, a dull clatter of hooves rang out as Yuzong rushed into Yuhua Immortal City with 3,000 soldiers. At Yuzong's order, 3,000 soldiers surrounded the square, while he went straight to Princess Zhongli with a dozen of his deputies. Wuxia gave Yuzong a glance and found that his cultivation base was still the same as before. Over the past few years, Yuzong had been living like a dog, and his cultivation base had not improved at all. A man like Yuzong was no longer worthy of Wuqi's attention. He yawned lazily and did not even bother to say a word. Let Princess Zhongli do whatever she wants. With Princess Zhongli's cultivation base now close to that of a gold immortal, even if Yuzong brought all the human army garrisoned in Yuhua Heavenly Realm here, they would not be able to withstand a single strike from Princess Zhongli, not to mention the few men he brought with him. The gap between their cultivation bases and overall strength was too huge, and the number of people could not make up for it. Grinning coldly, Wuqia stretched out his hand and rubbed his face, slightly changing his facial features. Now that he was wearing a Taoist robe and using the means of an immortal, he naturally could not meet people with the face he used on Pengu continent. Therefore, he made up a new face. In any case, he was acting in a secretive manner, and there were many things that he could not tell others. As a result, his face was getting thicker and thicker, and he was gradually losing his original appearance. While Wuqia was rubbing his face, Yuzong just gave him a cold glance. Yuzong could not help but sneer when he saw Wuqia standing aside as if nothing had happened. Another gutless itinerant cultivator, who needs my partner to fight for me when dealing with a few soldiers. I'll just drive this itinerant cultivator away. Yuzong did not even have the mood to kill him. On the other hand, Princess Zhongli was indeed a beautiful woman. Her face, her figure, her noble temperament, and her ancient and mysterious charm had made Yuzong's heart burn. And he wished he could do something to Princess Zhongli right there and then. Unlike ordinary female cultivators and immortals, Princess Zhongli was born in the depths of the imperial palace. She had been living in luxury since she was a child, and she had her own power. No one in the entire Great Yin dynasty dared to offend her. As a result, her temperament was completely different from those female cultivators and immortals. The noble, lofty, sacred, and inviolable aura naturally exuded from her bones. Yuzong had never seen someone as wonderful as her. Impatient, Yuzong reached out to grab Princess Zhongli's arm and burst into laughter. Come back with me, my good girl. I'll let you enjoy the luxurious clothes and all the benefits. Hehe, you can have anything you want if you follow me. Princess Zhongli was having a good time beating the few soldiers. Although the 3,000 soldiers brought by Yuzong had surrounded the square, she did not take them seriously. But when Yuzong dared to reach out to grab her, Princess Zhongli flew into a rage and gave him a backhand slap. Yuzong did not think much of it. The delicate look of Princess Zhongli was not a deterrent to him at all. Besides, those who cultivated the primordial Tao of divinity were different from ordinary cultivators. Ordinary people could not tell how profound Princess Zhongli's cultivation base was. When he saw Princess Zhongli's slap coming at him, Yuzong smiled and put his face forward, intentionally letting Princess Zhongli slap him, and at the same time, feel the smoothness and warmth of the beauty's palm. A loud boom rang out as Yuzong's head was smashed and exploded like a rotten watermelon. He did not have the smoothness and warmth of the beauty's palm, but he did have a palm that was thousands of times harder than a diamond, and had the power to shatter the stars. After killing Yuzong with the palm, a crimson flame shot out of Princess Zhongli's palm, and engulfed Yuzong's entire body. A faintly discernible scream rang out as both his soul and fleshly body were burned to ashes by the flame. The soldiers brought by Yuzong shrieked with fear, drew their weapons, and charged forward at the same time. Princess Zhongli gave a cold snort as purple thunderbolts flashed around her body, shooting out bolts the size of baskets like raindrops and knocking the 3,000 soldiers off their feet. In the time it took for an ordinary person to take a sip of water, the 3,000 soldiers, whose cultivation base was only at the nascent soul realm, and whose strongest deputy was only at the level of a lower-tier heaven immortal, were wiped out. The square was quiet, and even the immortal officials of the immortal abode had carefully retracted their heads, not daring to look in their direction. Princess Zhongli and Wuqi exchanged a glance and smiled. Ignoring the others, they stepped into the teleportation formation. A quarter of an hour later, they arrived at Pilyuo Heavenly Realm. You're tuning in to the Limei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.